Good evening.
The broadcast is live. All righty. Woohoo! Here we are.
I like the Vincent
Yeah.
Price intro there. Good evening.
I have to broadcast today from the boudoir because when the rest of the
Your quiet room away from the dogs?
no, it's my quiet room away from the humans.
Ah, okay.
It's whatever crisis happens, they're just going to have to deal with it on their own, which is more complex than it sounds. But anyway.
So what are we talking about today?
Well,
Well,
what are we talking about today?
Well,
Pseudo-intellectual topics.
Pseudo-intellectual topics. Scott and I were in Sleepy Readers live chat with Comic Crack and La Raza, and when he came in with the news that John Paul Leon died.
Oh yeah.
And I ended up with in a discussion with that guy. Man, he has the name of his business. Foam and panels.
Oh, foam and architectural panels.
Yeah, foam and architectural panels, and he kind of didn't agree with me on the idea that John Paul Leon is not a superhero artist, because that's why he's not as famous as he should be. Because he was a very good artist, but he didn't have that spectacular art that catapults you to stardom in a.
I think more noir kind of a style.
Yeah, I think he drew superheroes, but I don't think he was a superhero artist either in terms of his style.
Right.
He actually when I first saw his stuff, he actually reminded me of Jorge Zafino. He had a very kind of Jorge Zafino style.
Well, early on, when he was not as good. Yeah, I understand, because
now that I think of it, I didn't know he did static.
Oh,
I didn't either.
The thing is Zafino is not a very clean artist.
Right.
He never was. And I think Leon was cleaner and he had a better style of storytelling, even early on.
But I think he had the same type of shadows and light as Zafino.
Sure.
He saw light kind of in the same way. At least in his I had no idea he drew static. It's funny because I know Jorge, I know John Paul Leon's stuff from Earth X and before that. I can't remember what he did before Earth X.
Challengers of the Unknown
stuff there.
You know that Challengers of the Unknown series with the characters that nobody knew?
Okay. But I just had no, because I just had no. I had zero clue that he drew static. I just find that not that I read static. I basically ignored all superhero comics in the early 90s. But it's like I missed all of Milestone. I missed all of Valiant in the 90s. I just wasn't reading any of them. So, but I knew Static was the most popular of the of the Milestone stuff, but for some reason I never heard his name associated with it. I always heard, Dennis Cowan.
Right.
And who was was Dennis Cowan the writer on Static?
Don't know.
No, it was Dwayne McDuffie.
It was Dwayne McDuffie. Okay.
Dennis Cowan was the artist on Prototype. No, not Prototype. Hardware.
I know he was involved in the Milestone stuff. I thought he did some writing too, but I'm not sure. But like I said, for some reason, I never heard John Paul Leon's name associated with Static. I wonder why that is. That's just, I just found, I had no, I was like, he drew Static? First issue, I had no clue.
Every once in a while, you'll, come across an artist like, he drew what? When?
Yeah. Like, I didn't know David Lapham drew Valiant and Defiant stuff when I first started getting into Stray Bullets.
It's like, a lot of people be shocked to discover that Charles Vess actually did a cover for Transformers way back in the day.
Yeah.
Like, what?
I don't remember that, but.
Yeah, most people don't.
Yeah. Transformers.
Because drawing Earth X, you're drawing superheroes.
Right.
But that doesn't make you a superhero artist, because Earth X is not a traditional superhero story. And kind of what makes superheroes is not the type of story that you're telling. This is something that I had in mind for the fanzine that we're supposed to do one day.
Right.
But what makes superhero stories? It's not the stories themselves. It's not the theme. It's not even so much the tropes associated with the stories. It's the universe. It's the shared universe. Because the more superheroes you have connected, the more believable they are. If you create your own indie superhero and is the only super character in the story, it's not as believable.
Well, by that definition, superheroes weren't invented when superheroes were invented.
Yeah,
because the superhero shared universe is fairly new.
Yeah, but I can defend that. Defend that idea, taking into account the way they told stories in the 1940s.
Well, I was going to ask you, are you familiar with the concept of the Wold Newton universe?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Big fan.
I mean, that's
the what universe?
It's called the Wold Newton universe. It's a concept that related to pulp heroes, where a radioactive asteroid or meteorite landed somewhere in England. I don't know, 1600s, whatever year it may have been.
1840s.
It is a long time ago, pre 20th century. And the radiation from that asteroid influenced the birth of a lot of different characters that grew up to be pulp heroes, and they were all somehow related in one way or the other. So you had everything from James Bond to
one of those grand unifying theories.
Yeah, if you take like everything that was in League of the Extraordinary Gentlemen, for example, Tarzan, the Phantom, Doc Savage, whatever, somehow they're all tied together in common ancestry.
That seems to be, I think it started in the 90s in comics. It's like there's a whole bunch, and it's been used in TV too. There's been a whole bunch of like stories where everything started with one event. And like all these superheroes came from it.
Yeah, similar concept.
Like I think what were they? Like Straczynski's The 500 or whatever it was. That was his own one. Then I think didn't the Wildstorm universe start that way too?
Yeah, they had what was the concept? Actually, they had two sources because one was explored in Wildcats, which was you were a descendant of the Caribbeans or the Daemonites, or you were influenced by some sort of meteorite in the 1960s, but your powers needed to be activated, which was what they used in Stormwatch.
Right.
When you say
there was a couple of more universes like that. I can't remember which one in the superhero world.
There's Valiant in the new universe. They had one event that started it all.
Every time I hear something like that, where there's the one event that kind of unifies everything, all I can think about is that. I mean, I know this is really cynical, but all I can think of is that that's just like a preemptive strike for various companies to make money by doing crossovers and then justifying it, saying, well, of course.
I think it's easier than writing origin stories.
Yeah.
If all your characters have the same origin, you don't have to come up with new ones.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's just the way it happened. That's why
definition
Wonder Woman.
The definition Chris Girusso and I came up with of mutants. A mutant is a superhero without an origin story.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, sort of.
Because they all just happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Which is why it makes no sense that they do Wolverine origin, because Wolverine doesn't have an origin story. One day he didn't have powers, and then he did.
Yeah, but somebody altered him to have those powers. So
yeah, but that's not his origin. No, he had those powers beforehand. Then they just messed with them some more.
I see. I'm sorry. I guess I'm forgetting my Wolverine lore.
Yeah. Well, they've changed it so often over the years.
Right.
Like the Wolverine I liked was, a 17-year-old hothead.
Right.
And then they made him a 1,000-year-old samurai a couple of years later, and it was like, oh, that's a different origin, huh?
I somehow missed that. I don't know how.
Wolverine's really old. You didn't know that?
No, I had no idea. For some reason, I thought he was like some dude from like the 40s that got
Yeah,
altered. And
he's almost as old as I am.
They told some stories with him in Captain America in the 40s, right?
Mm-hmm. And then, if not Larry Hama, no, I think Larry Hama was involved in it because it was at the time that he was already writing Wolverine. But they showed some stories in the past with what appeared to be Logan remembering being in the wild frontier in North America back in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
oh.
And I think that also took that from. Have you read Robert Heinlein's Lazarus Long stories?
I have one.
Just
Because Chris Claremont originally based Wolverine's personality on Lazarus Long, right down to the bub. And the one thing about, he even said it like in the late 70s, whenever that was. And even Lazarus Long was a long-lived character too. So that he worked that in there with Wolverine eventually also. Like Lazarus Long, like in the Robert Heinlein universe, there was these, I think they were the family name was Long, and they were long-lived people that they lived for like 200 or 300 years, and they had to keep disguising themselves and going away. So regular people didn't find out that because regular people would get jealous and want to experiment on them or something to find out. So they kept things on the QT. Like you would be 50 or 60 and you had to age yourself too, kind of. And then you would fake your own death and go somewhere else. Except Lazarus Long was an even longer lived than the other Longs in the family. So that's why he became Heinlein's one of his main characters that he wrote a few books about. The
book I have is set in the future.
Yeah,
and there are more. There's even more than a Long family. There's a whole family of a whole, not city, but they're kind of spread out. Like they're the Inhumans as they're portrayed now, but they were part of an experiment that's selected for longer life. They have regular meetings, and then Lazarus Long goes to a meeting, and he kind of has to admit that he's Lazarus Long, and everybody's like in awe of him. Or I didn't believe you were real and stuff like that. And then they go out in space.
Yep.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Heinlein was an interesting character himself.
I have heard that.
He had some strange ideas.
Yeah, I haven't explored too much. I used to like Heinlein's books back in high school and college. I haven't really read much sci-fi since then.
I actually like
at some point I was like, you know what? I don't want to know too much about Heinlein because he seems a little crazy.
Heinlein was, he led an interesting life. There was a lot of weird stuff going on. You didn't realize there were a few science fiction writers back in the 40s that actually worked for the U.S. government in World War II for the Navy in weapons research, which included Asimov. I don't know if Frederick Pohl was part of that, and I don't think he was, but a couple others. And there's actually a pulp book about that. But there was some very interesting stuff going on back then.
You mean they'd work in weapons research, as in like think up weapons and then see if people could design them?
Amongst other things, yeah, they worked in a think tank.
That's so cool.
That reminds me of that George Carlin routine about the invention of the flamethrower. Have you heard that one?
No.
Where George Carlin goes, think about the flamethrower. Someone had to say, see that guy over there? I'd like to set him on fire.
Right.
If only there was some way I could throw flame on him. And he's like, and it would have ended right there, except his friend who was good with tools heard and went, hey, look at it. Then the army showed up and said, "We'll take 2,000 of those, paint them khaki."
So, pretty accurate, actually. Yeah.
But I love that that's what those science fiction writers were doing. They were saying,
Right.
see that guy over there? If only there was some way I could throw flame on him.
I remember reading a little article one time. A guy wrote, it was like, who was the first human that thought cracking an oyster open and eating it would be a good idea?
Somebody really hungry.
Yeah, somebody
who just watched seagulls. Somebody who watched seagulls grabbing them and
there you go. Could be that too.
I can't remember if it's in the 40s or maybe it's a little later, but somebody had designed an internal layout, almost like Star Trek, for a Navy ship, where you had the bridge and you had the different control consoles and everything. And I think it was one of the science fiction writers, and the Navy actually came to the guy and said, "Hey, can you design something like this for us?" And they implemented his designs.
Wow.
Okay, so Paolo's question before was, is superheroes a genre?
I think yes.
I think
then it got me thinking, what exactly is a genre? And I'm like, I'm not really.
It's just a term to describe certain tropes.
A literary tool.
No.
A literary tool, definitely. Are superheroes specific enough to have their own genre?
Today, yes. Now,
or are they a subgenre of heroes? I don't know. I don't know what genres are. Mystery, like mystery would be a genre.
Right.
Horror would be a genre.
Science fiction
would be a genre.
Mm-hmm.
Suspense would be a genre.
Fantasy.
Would superheroes be their own genre, or would they fall under one of those?
Or many of those.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can have superheroes.
That gets back to the definition of superheroes. Like, would it be a genre if it follows a certain, if it follows a certain narrative, like origin story?
Well, to me, a superhero is just a person with an impossible skill set,
right?
Or
yes,
Which
I agree. Which is why I say that Sherlock Holmes is a superhero. Which brings us back to the Walt Newton universe. Mm-hmm. Because all of them are somehow superheroes, even if you don't take into account the meteorite. All of those literary heroes from the Victorian age, they kind of have impossible skill sets. They're tremendously smart. They're very adaptive to any circumstance. They're able to build stuff in the middle of the woods in a deserted island.
Right, they can MacGyver things.
Yeah.
Hey, MacGyver was 100% realistic. He could make exploding pine cones.
Yeah.
Scotty could do it too. It'd just take 1/4 of the time he actually quoted.
Right.
Getting back to the genre thing, it's like taking the movie Alien. Is it science fiction or is it horror?
We know it's not superhero.
It's both. No, it's not superhero. That's true. Until Marvel gets hold of it and sticks Conan in there.
But would superhero be its own genre? I guess so.
I think so.
And you could have like superhero horror. If you can have science fiction horror, why can't you have superhero horror?
Yeah.
It just takes the right artist.
It's kind of like having. It's kind of like when you put a blower on your V8.
Yeah.
The blower itself doesn't do anything, but you put it on a V8 and you have a 1/4 mile 9-second car.
Paolo's making car references that are going right on.
But then you have the Flash, and he's a superhero, and he did a 1/4 of a mile in negative 14 seconds. Yeah.
The Flash.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You have the superhero. The superhero itself doesn't do anything except affect the outcome of stories that function without the superhero.
Huh?
Well,
I don't know. What are you saying?
There's a story. It can proceed normally. You put a
Right.
superhero in it, and it changes the way that the problem is handled.
Okay.
I just think if somebody says it's a superhero movie, you know what you're in for. So
Yeah, you have expectations.
right.
Mhm.
So that's why I would call it a genre, because if it was
Kind of like that famous court case where it says, I don't know what pornography actually is, but I know it when I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing, I kind of try to. Doctor Strange in the 80s was more superhero than occult. Of course, being written by Roger Stern and having art by Paul Smith helped people seeing it as a superhero.
Right.
But when I remember the contemporary stories featuring the new Defenders, after Doctor Strange and the Hulk were gone, and it was the Beast, Gargoyle, and the Angel and the Iceman, everybody in there, apart from Gargoyle, is way out of their comfort zone. You can tell the guys in tights are kind of looking around. What am I supposed to do here? But nobody thought that the new Defenders was not a superhero book, because normally the Defenders were a superhero book, but the themes that final iteration of the team, as written by Peter B. Gillis, they were not typical superhero stories. Even the villains were not proper villains. There was an element of strangeness around.
Here's a question. To be a superhero, do you need a certain visual element, a costume? Like, or would that just be a regular hero? So like stories of Hercules.
I was thinking Beowulf, yeah.
Yeah, but Hercules wears a costume.
They didn't have any kind of visual costume.
Oh, but Hercules did have a costume. You wore the head of the Lion of Nemea on his head.
Yeah, but that was to show his strength.
Yes, because he was a superhero. I'm a hero. Look at me. You know I'm a hero because I have a lion on my head.
Yeah, I guess so. But I'm sure not all. Odysseus had no costume, as far as I know. He was a story of a hero. I mean, I don't even know if he'd be a superhero. But would the distinction between a regular hero and a superhero be a costume? Would that be one of the distinctions? Like James Bond, let's say, is a hero. Let's call him.
I think
let's forget his impossible skill set for a second.
When you use the term superhero, and in that case, in 99.9% of the time, you have some sort of physical or mental ability,
right,
that is beyond normal human capability. Now, James Bond was not beyond normal human capability. He was just hyper capable as a human.
But if you have an impossible skill set like Batman, you're a superhero. Even though he's human, he's got an impossible skill set. No one could actually be Batman.
Yeah.
So that's why when you have an impossible skill set, that is a superpower beyond human. Even though when we say, "Oh, he's just a human," yeah, the Shadow is a superhero because he can cloud men's minds.
So but
he's got an actual
Shadow you're talking about.
Yeah, well, there's the Shadow who can cloud men's minds as a superhero.
Well, there was the radio version and there was the pulp version, and they had a lot of different things that were eventually later on incorporated into the same character.
Right. Like John McClane from Die Hard, I wouldn't call a superhero.
No,
he's just having a bad day.
Right.
He's got a headache.
Good evening.
There you are. We're having a discussion because of you, man. that thing we talked about last week on Sleepy Reader's stream. The Phantom has an impossible skill set.
I don't
know. I haven't read enough Phantom to know.
A lot of people consider the Phantom to be the first modern costume superhero.
Yeah. Right. He's got. I would say if you've got a costume, you're probably a superhero to begin with. Because I think that was invented with the superhero because of its nature, of its 4-color printed nature. That's why the superhero costume was kind of invented.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't, when you were on the radio, you didn't really need a costume.
Mm-hmm.
But you can think of it this way: the Four Musketeers had costumes, but they weren't superheroes.
Yeah.
No, they had military garb.
Right. I don't.
Yeah. And the same thing with the Arthurian story. Some of those guys had skill sets that were way beyond, normal humans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't know though.
Why do you have to be an asshole?
It's like that. It's like
when it happens in just one story,
superhero kind of separate.
Yeah, it's like a hero can do things ordinary people can't, but that's because they rise to the moment.
Yeah. Is Popeye a hero? That's a good question.
But I mean, don't superheroes just have?
Popeye is a superhero because he's got superpowers. If you've got superpowers, you're a superhero.
But isn't the costume thing really irrelevant? Because don't the characters have costumes solely because of whether they were in print or animated, or in other words, like Popeye doesn't have a costume, but he wears the same clothes all the time because he's an animated character, and that's just how you can animation.
That's why superheroes have costumes, because they needed something colorful to print. That's why costumes became the norm for superheroes. But with Popeye, if Popeye was a regular sailor and didn't have superpowers, he'd just be a regular hero.
Right.
So the costume doesn't make you necessarily a superhero. If and Popeye doesn't have a costume, he's got a sailor's outfit.
Right.
But I don't think that counts as a costume.
Then what defines a costume?
Something unique to you that you've designed for appearances sake.
If you are recognizable in it, it's a costume.
Gotcha. Because I was just saying that Three Musketeers were cited before.
We're not even using the word hero literally in superhero, because we count supervillains as superhero. Right. I don't think we should take the word hero literally in superhero, and discuss in terms of superhero as a genre.
Mm-hmm.
You're just talking about superpowered people in general.
Yeah, it's just easier to say superhero than superpowered person,
Mm-hmm.
Well, the term supers has been bandied about a lot.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the people that were not here from the beginning, I mentioned that superheroes are not I proposed that superheroes are not a genre, and I made a comparison to a supercharger in an engine. The supercharger itself doesn't do anything, but you plug it into the engine being a representation for a regular genre, and it turns the genre into something more, better, super
duper.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, those who don't understand anything about engines are like,
Yeah, the thing is, nerds don't know how to drive. So when I mention mechanical stuff,
I can tell you more about how warp core actually works than the real engine does.
Yeah. Hero in Greek myth was any demigod. Yeah, because they did spectacular things.
mm-hmm.
But we
don't know what the genre would be. That's heroic? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I really haven't discussed genres enough to know. Are there like 5 recognized genres and everything else falls under those? Or in terms of literary genres, I have never gone there.
Semantics, you could argue yourself till you're blue in the face about where.
Yeah. Well, words have meaning, so.
You could take everything in science fiction and subclassify that as a subclassification of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Although I've heard the argument that that the only science fiction that's actually science fiction is fiction based on science that already.
Not necessarily. I think I came up with a good divisory line for what is science fiction and what is fantasy, and that line is plastic.
Yeah.
Are there things made of plastic? Then it's science fiction, because if not, it's fantasy.
Well, there's also space opera.
Yeah.
Yeah, space opera is a subdivision.
Yeah. Sleepy Reader, he's much more literary than I am. So he's saying genres are constantly argued. So that's what this would be.
See, even in science fiction, you get in these long discussions about, was this space opera, is this sword and sandal, or is it planetary romance? And it's like you're splitting hairs at that point.
And there's Star Wars isn't science fiction; it's space opera.
Right, but because you have plastic, it's usually recognized as science fiction.
Oh, and my complaint of the week has speculative fiction. There's another genre.
Yeah.
Ties in with this, and here is DC celebrating Asian History Month with Comic Shop Weekly. And this picture is so much of what I don't like about corporate comics. Because out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Asian heroes we have on this cover, we've got OMAC, Green Lantern, Superman, Batman, Green Arrow, and the Atom. So 6 out of 10 are just variations of a regular superhero. And that is, to me, like everything I don't like about corporate comics is, and I understand other people like this. Other people who want an Asian superhero love Asian Batman or Batwoman, whatever she is. They like that. To me, it's just like marketing. It's just, we can create a new hero, or we can make 9 more variations of Batman.
All right.
And one of the reasons I don't like it is, to me, it's less heroic.
Yeah.
Because the hero part of superhero, and what got me thinking about this too was, I saw some video this week on one of those parkour guys. It was just guy jumping off of buildings, landing on, climbing up stuff, climbing down stuff, tumbling, jumping. You've seen those parkour type videos.
And if
before.
he was a superhero, his name would have been Peter Parkour.
There we go.
Oh.
And I said to myself, what makes a parkour guy? What makes this guy? And I said to myself, do I think I could do this? And the conclusion I came to is, if I was 20, I had the physical ability to do that. I'm a good athlete, run, jump, whatever. But to do that is more than physical ability. You have to have a certain mentality. You have to be a thrill seeker, a risk taker. And you have to have the kind of discipline and will to learn that and do that. So even though I certainly think I had the physical ability when I was 20 to do all that parkour stuff, I don't think I ever could, because I don't have that thrill seeker.
Right.
Well, I have normal thrill seeker, I should say, because when you're good at physical stuff, you want to do physical stuff. So if you're good at sports, you want to do sports. If you're not good at sports, you don't want to do sports. But even to do that, he was like jumping off of the roofs of, jumping a whole story or so and landing and rolling. You have to not only have physical ability, and you have to have like beyond normal thrill-seeking gene kind of stuff to make you want to leap off the top of a building and tumble down and land on a fence and jump off that and tumble down. And I think it's the same with superheroes. What always made, Batman unique or Spider-Man unique was, and they always taught us this in the comic books, was it's not just their powers, it's that they're hero. How many comic books have we read where the superhero loses his power, but he's still a hero? They still get it through. When you make like 15 versions of Batman, that's pretty much saying anybody can be Batman. It is just, powers. So that's what annoys me about, corporate comics making 9 different versions of Superman and 6 different versions of the Green Arrow. It says, superheroes are nothing special. Anybody can be one. So that was my annoying thing of the week, just seeing that. But and I understand it. It's because if you're going to make a new hero, your best chance for short-term success is to take a popular hero and duplicate him.
Yeah, it's the X version of.
What was that?
It's the X version of.
Yeah.
You don't even need to market it.
It's a marketing tool.
Well,
it's just that's what drives me crazy. It's just market. If this were filled with unique Asian heroes, I'd be much happier with it.
Right.
Instead of just knockoffs of. I mean, as of right now, any month you want to celebrate, there's probably a Batman and Superman for. No matter what genre of person you want to celebrate, I bet you there's a Batman for that. Because they just keep making more Batmans.
Right.
There isn't a trans Batman yet.
Is there?
Not yet.
I don't know. I don't object to it.
There's gay Batwoman. I know that.
Okay.
I'm not gonna say there's not a trans Batman yet because I'm just not sure because I haven't been able to keep track of all the Batman.
Is there a flat earther Batman yet?
I don't know.
And is it Flat Earther 1 or Flat Earther 2? Yeah.
I'm sure somewhere in someone's basement there's a flat earther Batman.
Wait, so what's a bizarro flat earther?
A regular flat
The
earther.
Earth is round.
A regular flat earther was a bizarro.
Well, hold on. Bizarro World is a cube.
Yeah.
So
what is a bizarro flat earth?
Pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
A line.
Bizarro World.
Or a dodecahedron. Yeah.
There you go.
Or a dish.
Dodecahedron.
Or a fish. Yeah.
A dish. Or maybe it is just a disc, but they're all upside down. But would they know they're upside down?
So Terry Pratchett would be their god then, right?
Yeah. Hey, look, a turtle.
And I also find it interesting that in all these Asian superheroes, now, first of all, it is really difficult to distinguish between European and Asian eyes in a comic book drawing. It just really is. They're so small in a comic book drawing that showing someone as Asian just by a drawing that big is really tough. And I noticed in this, out of the 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them have their eyes covered. I mean, superheroes often have their eyes covered,
Right.
but it's like you can't tell Batwoman's Asian at all because she's covered from head to toe. Omac, I was like, I would have never guessed Omac over here was Asian because he's got those white eyes with weird heavy brows that they give, those sort of Jack Kirby brows. Green Lantern
doesn't even matter because the way that Omacs operate now is like they're the Borg. They just rewrite you into an Omac. You no longer have individuality.
It was just funny to me seeing the all the Asian superheroes that you can't even tell are Asian. But how could you? I mean, it is really difficult to distinguish between European and Asian features in a comic book. It just is hard. Because usually you use an eye is like 3 lines.
Yeah. If you took somebody who didn't know a damn thing about superheroes, didn't know anything about superheroes or science fiction or anything, and you showed them a picture of the Power Rangers, would they immediately think that's a superhero costume?
I would think so.
I would think so too. Yeah.
Well, if they don't know it's superhero,
I don't think it's cultural appropriation when you're trying to appeal to the world at large. Cultural appropriation, from what I understand, is when a majority population imitates the culture of a minority population. And with something like this, I don't think this counts as a minority population, only because DC Comics now and Marvel Comics both are trying to appeal worldwide. So Asia is not a minority population in the context of the world.
That's true.
And when it's like when Marvel puts Chinese actors in their movies to appeal to the market in China, that's not cultural appropriation, because China is not a minority population. They might be a minor in the context of a Halloween party at your local college. Something like that might be cultural appropriation. But in the context of a Marvel movie, marketing it worldwide, I don't think it would be cultural appropriation.
Well, I think especially because they're trying to appeal to the Asian population as
you're back to marketing again. Yeah.
Right.
Let's because I mean Hollywood is notorious for not having Asians in the movies. I mean, everybody, all kinds of movies, there are white people playing Asians. Like for years, nobody bothered to actually hire Asian actors. So like Hollywood for sure, sort of, caters to, or not caters to, that's the wrong word. They're trying to be a little more inclusive.
Right. Like the 70s TV show Kung Fu.
Yeah.
You could make an argument for cultural appropriation there because you had David Carradine playing a Chinese guy. I mean, I don't even know if that would be cultural appropriation. It would be we're afraid to put we're afraid to put Bruce Lee in the lead because white people might not watch it. I don't know if that's cultural appropriation, but at least you can make an argument for that.
Exactly. Well, I think that's more cultural insensitivity than appropriation.
Yeah,
because cultural appropriation does not exist. Cultures multiply by infecting the ideas of people who did not live with that culture.
Right. Well, I think cultural appropriation, like I said, is a very specific thing.
Mm-hmm. Cultures are memes, so they have to transfer to alien people, to people alien to that culture, in order to continue to expand.
If you think about in historical context, the closest equivalent we have the Borg is the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
He took over everybody, and everybody did what the Romans said.
Yep.
Well, I think I don't know what they're called. The Chinese Empire was similar
Mongolian
too.
Empire, yeah.
I don't know my dynasties well enough over in China to name the empires, but.
I wonder. Oh, go ahead. Go. Sorry.
No.
Would it be cultural appropriation? Just speaking of without getting too into the religion thing, would it be cultural appropriation when the Christians invaded the northern European islands and sucked a whole bunch of paganism into, like Christmas trees and mistletoe and that kind of stuff? That's
not good. That's just culture.
That's cultural that was adaptation. In order to advance one idea, which in this case was Christianity adopted tropes from paganism. That's called syncretism.
Thank you. It just cracks me up when that happens. When
Christmas is celebrated on December the 25th, because they came to a consensus that we need to have some sort of a midwinter. Satisfies everybody.
I think cultural appropriation also exists, but it's a specific thing rather than like I said, the best definition I heard of it is when the majority population takes things from the minority population kind of ad hoc, willy-nilly.
That's what the minority population is there for. In order to find acceptance within a larger community, they have to make sure that what's typical of their culture is accepted by the majority ruling culture.
But not when you dress up as them for Halloween. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It depends on the context.
In the European context, that does not exist.
Yeah, well, in the U.S., we've had lots of oppressed minorities in recent years, so it exists still, and there's all sorts of sensitivities going on. So, and and Europe, they wiped out whole peoples if you didn't agree. Who wants to see some comics from this week?
Ooh, I do.
I like this cover. I couldn't figure out who drew it.
Rorschach. Ooh.
It's Nocterra #3.
Okay.
I enjoyed this cover when I looked at it. I think it's Tony S. Daniel, but I can't make out that signature.
I have no idea what that signature is.
I have no idea what it says.
No, I can't tell what it is.
It could be Tony D. Safar. I don't know what it is.
Could
but,
be Tony from
I still don't know if I added this to my pull list or not. I'm gonna have to see this week because, like I said, I may have just added this issue because that's what sometimes when I'm unsure at the beginning, I add it issue by issue because I get an email where I can add comics to my pull list or stuff like that. Or I can add the whole series. I can just add it to my pull list so they get me every issue from now on, or I can add it issue by issue. And I think I'm not sure what I decided on this, so I'll have to look and see if it's there. But I enjoyed this. This has grown on me a bit. Once again, it's a post-apocalyptic story. Sleepy Reader has his own. Black music was taken without benefiting black musicians historically. That could be a definition.
Yeah.
But most musicians weren't benefiting either. I mean, very few musicians benefited from their music. So music companies ripped off black people, they ripped off white people, they ripped off all the people they can. So is it cultural appropriation when they ripped off a black person, but not cultural appropriation when they ripped off a white person?
No, what they're talking about is black people coming up with musical styles, songs, whatever, and then white people coming along and ripping off specific music and getting paid.
Yeah. They're talking.
That means black people won.
Talking about
but white people also came up with specific music styles and were ripped off.
This is true, but
is that not cultural appropriation? Is one is cultural appropriation and the other isn't? I mean, it could be. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it would be if it was a non-white person ripping off the white person's music. But I think
if a white person rips off a black person, it's cultural appropriation. If a white person rips off a white person, it's not
any music with 4/4 structure is ripped off of Johann Sebastian Bach.
Yeah, I don't know enough about music to talk about what came from what. I just know black musicians were ripped off and white musicians were ripped off too. So I don't know what would make one cultural appropriation and what make, because I just don't know enough about music either.
Given the popularity.
Well, that's
given the you would if you had listened to Black Sabbath.
There you go.
And given the way that music disseminates right now, the two biggest jazz music festivals in the world are in Quebec and Switzerland. Switzerland.
It's been going on for years.
Yeah.
You know what the difference between rock music and jazz music is? Jazz music, you play 4,000 chords for 3 people, and rock music, you play 3 chords for 4,000 people.
But white music was also consistently. Let's see, if you rip off a musician who's black, it's cultural appropriation. If you rip off a musician who's white. It's not. Is the only distinction I can see is the color of the person you're ripping off from.
Well,
color and because they're from
And that might be true.
cultures.
I don't know.
But
But that's the only distinction.
Well, Phil brings up a very good point about Elvis is considered the king of rock and roll, and he is. I think the true king of rock and roll was Chuck Berry.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's just marketing the king of rock and roll too. They just came up with that name for him and marketed it, like the king of pop.
Right.
That's the name that Michael Jackson gave himself and made MTV call him.
Right, but Elvis is a really good example, actually, because when he first started out, the people who were who were interested in him were specifically looking for a guy who sounded black but was white.
Yeah,
so
no,
he didn't sound black. He just sounded Southern.
I'm just saying that's what I heard that they said. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just. He was a natural blonde. He dyed his hair black. But, I mean,
when cultural perception,
when Django Reinhardt took jazz music to Europe, is that appropriation? Nobody in Europe knew what it was. It was only that guy. That guy liked the sound so much that I want to play this. And you went to a place where people were only used to listening to classical music, and he played it.
Right.
You have to understand that by the 1920s and 30s, the United States were a completely separate culture to what was going on in Europe. So anything that was done in America and Europeans picked up on it would be appropriation. Doesn't matter which person in America was doing it.
Yeah, but America isn't a specific. America is not one big culture, especially in the 1920s. There was
neither is Europe,
and there was white culture back then. So if a white person went,
there wasn't white culture. There was Italian culture, Irish culture. Irish American.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if somebody
there's only white culture when we compare it to black culture. Let's not forget that.
I was generalizing.
I know. I'm just saying.
And if it's new. And if it's from Louisiana, it was different culture to whatever was going on in the Bible Belt.
Right.
No.
And Sleepy says here, if you have consistent transferal of black music to white music we also have consistent transferal of white music to black culture.
Yeah, but not as much to the detriment.
Like I said, once again, it's the majority minority thing too. It's but is that the only distinction in cultural? I think that's our only distinction in cultural appropriation is majority minority, because no one would call black heavy metal groups cultural appropriation.
Oh, I have to show you a Mozambican heavy metal group.
There you go.
And you know how you get heavy metal in African countries? It's the rich people doing it. They imported.
There is actually, I can't remember, it may be Ethiopia, but there is one African country that has a really interesting metal scene going on. And it's not what you would expect at all. It's like, wow, it's just like,
the only thing I can figure out is if there's not a majority minority relationship, there's no cultural appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
The cultural appropriation only exists within that relationship. That relationship doesn't exist, neither does cultural appropriation.
I think appropriation is an interesting term in of itself, but if you think about music is like a virus. It's going to spread around and people are going to get into it no matter where they are. They don't. Right. It doesn't care if it's appropriated or not. It is what it is.
Right. I'm going to give you an example. Another example. There were a bunch of musicians from the Portuguese African colonies who specifically went to Europe to disseminate the music from their countries. Right. They wanted people to know about it, and they wanted people to sing it and absorb it.
I think that happens all the time. You're right. I was just watching I watched the show called Skindigenous. Mm-hmm. And it's about indigenous tattooing. And a lot of it takes place in, like, the last one I think I saw took place in, like, the mountains of Indonesia. And there's a couple of tattoo artists there, and they're like, And they're thrilled that tourists are coming so they can tattoo the tourists, and their town becomes a tourist destination and helps out the town. And they're like, I want to spread my culture. I want the people out there in the world to see my culture. And I think that happens. But which is why I think cultural appropriation only happens within that majority-minority relationship. Outside that relationship, there's no such thing as cultural appropriation. You wanting to tattoo foreigners to spread your culture is not cultural appropriation. That's you wanting to spread your culture. Those musicians wanting to go out and spread their music is them sharing their culture. So I think there's a huge distinction to be made between wanting to share your culture and thinking you had your culture stolen from you. And I think that thinking you have your culture stolen from you only exists within that majority-minority relationship.
Well, and financially, like if you're
but everybody gets ripped off. That's what that will make you feel more appropriate. You're right, but I don't think being ripped off has anything to do with that majority. Feeling ripped off has nothing to do with that majority-minority relationship. Majority rips themselves off a whole lot more. We wouldn't call. I wouldn't say that just because the minority was ripped off, that was cultural appropriation. It could be viewed as it, because cultural appropriation only exists within that relationship. It can certainly be viewed as it, but I don't think just being ripped off is distinct enough.
That is true. I mean, I'm thinking of what's the name of that white chick who pretended to be black for years?
I don't know. She made the news. I don't.
Yeah, she had like blue eyes and claimed to be Cajun or something like that. I mean, it was just ridiculous. She's like, I identify as black. Yes, but you're not. I think that was everybody called that cultural appropriation as well and got very upset, which is understandable.
Uh-oh. Sleepy's accusing us of having a total lack of American musical history. I don't think that's true.
And the guy on this panel knows more about Detroit techno than anyone else.
No way.
Oh boy.
Even the Middle Eastern guys out in a tent jam. Yeah. Like I said, I think there's the difference is just. See, I don't think the difference is an existence of profit, as I just said there. But that could certainly be part of it.
I remember once Maxi Jazz from Faithless described how it was when he and the other guy from Faithless, Jimmy Caro, did the other music project that wasn't Faithless. I can't remember what the name was, but Maxi Jazz said that they went to somewhere in Chad, and found a guy playing something local and recorded it and took it home as a sample.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, lots.
And the next comic I got, Kaiju Max has started up again.
Oh, how many volumes is that in now?
This is season 6. So that makes 5 seasons of 6 issues. So there's 30 issues so far, and each season has sort of a different theme. And I found this first issue interesting because this issue's theme is, and Kaiju Max is kaiju are giant monsters, and Max refers to the prison they're in, and in this one, Earth is being invaded because we're part of this, this whole, we have spaceships and giant, we're part of this whole, we know about space and all that, but there's this giant invasion of Earth happening. So they're trying to sign up some of the kaiju in the war effort. So it's like, will the kaiju sign up? Will they not sign up? Da, da, da. So that was what this first issue was all about, which was a lot of fun.
I might have to pick that one up for Spence.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I recommend listening to Harry Smith or Folkways. Oh, yeah, I have heard those Folkways recordings. Yeah. Racial doses, yes. A case of appropriating not only culture, but claiming racial identity, not one's own. Ursula Le Guin wrote a book called The Lathe of Heaven, the main guy, whatever he dreams happens, and the doctor is trying to control his dream. Eventually, he breaks out and dreams everyone gray. Gray.
Dorian Gray?
But yeah, Kaiju Max is always a good book. It was Sleepy Reader who first got me into that one. I didn't get the first season of it, but Damien was showing it all the time. So when season 2 started, I picked that up.
Yeah, Zender Cannon was one of those guys that I always mean to get into, but then I never do.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the first thing. What has he done before this? This is the first time I've ever heard of him.
One of the earliest things he did was a series that was called Replacement God.
Yeah, and he was the artist. And he was the artist on Alan Moore's Top 10 at ABC Comics.
He goes back that far?
Yeah, Xander and his brother, I can't remember his brother's name off the top of my head. They've been working together for years.
Oh, that's right. He's got a brother, too. He mentioned that in one of the backstories.
They worked on a graphic novel for Jim Avadiani, who does science-based comics. They did a story called Bone Sharps and Thunder Lizards, which is about the great fossil wars that went on back in the 1800s between Cope and the other guy. I can't remember his name, but there's a war between these two different fossil hunters that showed up at different, dig sites trying to get the best fossils. And Spielberg actually optioned that for a movie, but it never got made into a movie.
Okay. Oh, and Fear Case wrapped up this month with his oversaturated, wavy cover.
Another cover that you can tell what it is.
See the little wave. Yeah. That almost looks like corrugated cardboard. Yeah.
That's kind of what it looks like. But this was okay, this series. I mean, I'm not going to tell you it was great, but it was okay. This is kind of a Matt Kint and Tyler and Hillary Jenkins, and I'd give this one a B. I don't have much to say about it. Fear Case. Someone gives you the case, and you either have to give it to the person you hate most, or it will go to the person you love the most in 3 days.
Oh, I remember.
And don't look in the case. My CGC question about this was, how does CGC grade comics like this? I mean, all of them are oversaturated. It's like, can you give a comic that's wavy a 9.8? Or do you have to have, will pressing get this out? I don't know.
You paid them to give you an opinion on something like that.
Yeah. I've just heard no one address it. No one's, I don't know if no one notices it. I mean, I sure notice it.
Yeah.
Does CGC note wavy comic on? I mean, what do they? How do you take off half a grade? Is that considered a production? Just part of the production of the comic?
Right.
So it's like, how does CGC grade those? Like, have you seen what was it? Spider-Man 600 that came out a few years ago. That was like an 80-page comic that was saddle stitched, i.e. staples.
Yeah.
Which means that when you have an 80-page comic that's folded, it busts the top corners. There's just no way around it. So there's little burrs on the top and bottom corners because it's 80 pages folded over. It's gonna bust the. Do they take off for that?
No,
Is that just considered part of the production? I don't know. I have these questions for CGC that I have no answers to.
Maybe that's part of the scheme, is when they slab it, everything gets flattened out.
Could be. But then they sell pressing services, so I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah, but Fear Case was this like I said, it was a B. There's nothing much to talk about it with. It was a fine comic. Don't rush out and get. This is one of those comics that 6 months from now, I'll see someone on YouTube go, "Oh, I found these all in the dollar bin," and I'll be like, "Yeah, I paid $4 a piece for those, and I'll feel ripped off. That's what always happens.
Have you ever bought a comic from a dollar bin or a cheaper bin, knowing that it's such a good comic it shouldn't be there?
I have, but I so rarely look through dollar bins anymore that I don't know. Couldn't make it past the first issue of Fear Case, partially because of the wavy cover and pages, but mostly because Kint's writing started to lose my. Yeah, this is not one of the more interesting Matt Kint written things. It just isn't. I mean, I like Matt Kint's writing, but like I said, that's a B. And most of Matt Kint's writing is B+ to A. It might even be a B-. I just downgraded it because it's got wavy paper. And who likes wavy paper? Speaking of wavy paper, did you see who was it? Was it Mind the Comics asking about this was really good, by the way. Really, really good. Cool. I mean, it surprised me how good this was. This was so good. Yeah. Because I haven't read any I realized I haven't read any new Barry Windsor Smith since Storyteller.
There hasn't been any new Barry Windsor Smith since.
I think they said like he put out something called Opus in the late 90s.
Opus was an art book.
Oh, it was an art book?
Yeah,
okay.
2-volume set of art books is all they were.
Okay, so it wasn't even a comic to read.
No.
Dollar bin rescues all the time, getting doubles and sending them to La Raza. I noticed that Comic Crack did that. I was watching her video, and I know Sleepy has sent her some doubles too.
Is the whole
La Raza opened up a big package from Comic Crack this week, and I was like, "Ooh, look at all that fun stuff." But someone on maybe Mind the Comic, someone on YouTube on Twitter was asking about the paper on this because they heard the paper wasn't good. And I said I didn't notice anything wrong with the paper. And then someone later on came and said there's two versions of this. There's the Fantagraphics version, which this is, and then another publisher put it out, I think an English publisher. And the other publisher put it out on thinner paper. So that's why people were complaining about the paper. But this
is the entire thing in black and white?
It's in black and white, yes.
Good.
Which some people are upset about.
Was the British version made by a regular book publisher?
It may have been. I'd have to look on my Twitter to see who it came from.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Oh, there we go.
Because that would explain it. It doesn't matter what you think about Gary Groth, but Fantagraphics does a very, very good job doing that type of publications. Yeah. And when somebody else tries to reprint it, they always go for the cheaper option, especially if it's licensed to another country.
1.8 kilograms against 1.0 kilograms. So this paper is almost twice as heavy as the other Jonathan Cape Limited. I guess that's the publisher. But like I said, I was really surprised. It was funny because I bought this almost on a whim because I saw I knew it was coming out and I read about it and was like, do I want that? Do I not want that? This was last week. And then as I was going to the comic shop, I'm like, you know what? If he's got a copy of it at the comic shop, I'll buy it. So I'm like, I'm going to put an extra $40 in my wallet. I took my budget from the upcoming week and put it in my wallet. And I was like, if he has it there, I'll get it. Sure enough, he had it there and I got it. Then as I'm bringing it home, I'm going, is that going to be any good? I just spent $40 on a book and I haven't read any Barry Windsor Smith in a long while. And I didn't realize till I was driving home with it how long it had been. Yeah. Since I read any Barry Windsor Smith. And I'm like, then I started thinking, what's the Barry Windsor Smith I really like? Conan, from the 70s. I liked Rune well enough. I liked Storyteller well enough. But they're not what I'd call masterpieces. This is a masterpiece. Kind of. This is probably the best thing Barry Smith has done. So I didn't know he could write this well.
And what's it about?
It's kind of, I was thinking about when I found out, I was thinking about what genre it might be in. And then I was like, would this be magical realism? It started life as a Hulk story, but it really has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
There's a backstory to this where he wrote this Hulk story in the 80s and drew it for Marvel, where he started the whole Hulk's father was abusive thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think we were talking about this recently.
Right, right. And but it really doesn't have a lot to do with that. Good day, youngsters. Even though Monsters wasn't a Hulk book, it redefined how I look at the character. It's one of the saddest comics I've read, it is. It really didn't. I really didn't associate with the Hulk at all. Probably because I didn't read much of that post. I didn't read much of the Peter David Hulk and the post Bill Mantlo Hulk. But what it's about takes place in 46 and 64, 65.
Oh, right. I remember you talking about this. That's right.
Right. And it starts off with a guy trying to join the army. And they instead drag him off to this to be experimented on. Right. And it's about this poor sad, and we flash back to this guy who wanted to join the army, his childhood. He grew up like during World War II with his mother. His father was off during World War II. And then his father came home from the war and he was different. He was violent and mean. And so it's all about, and then the story also became about when he walked into the recruiter's office to sign up for the army. The recruiter who was a good guy who said, "Oh, Mike got a guy for this program," and sent him off. He became guilty, and it became about him too. So it became about the recruiter and the history of his family, and it became about this kid and the history of his family, and they intertwined at different times too. So it was really about the intertwining of these two lives. Mm-hmm. And it was also about this program, which, tried to make him into a super soul. But it was like all this superheroics was a very small part in the background.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was really about there's a cast of about 8 characters who it really gets into all their lives. I pre-ordered Nocturne, but still haven't gotten it. Oh man, that's annoying. That's why I don't like to pre-order things like this, because it's like, why am I giving them my money first? Yeah.
I mean, the Jonathan Cape website. So they're a British division of Penguin. And well, they have a pretty interesting catalog of graphic novels. So let's see: Mouse, Persepolis, Ghost World, Jimmy Corrigan, Black Hole. So yeah, and some adaptations of To Kill a Mockingbird, Animal Farm, and Frank's Diary.
So all stuff that's going to depress you.
Yeah, but okay, but it sounds kind of strange, because when people are complaining about the quality of the overall quality of the book, because they have the type of collection that you need to be careful with what you're putting out.
Right.
He said the mother story. She was one of the 8 or so characters who they're all sort of main characters. They were all given a lot of time. But one of my favorite, it was only like a 2-page sequence in the book that was so beautifully done, was and it was only a small part of the book, but it was the part that was about destiny. The recruiter who recruited the son, when we flashed back to his story of his childhood, there was also this is the magical realism part. He and then later his daughter had sort of this mystical power, this shining, for lack of a better word. Who they could, his daughter, who they could, they got premonitions and things. But he was telling the story to his mother about having met an angel in the street. Mm-hmm. And his mother's like, "Stop that! But his grandmother was like, "Well, that's because you've got this power, you're whatever." But his mother was like, "Yeah, I don't believe this. Stop talking about that nonsense." Or maybe that was his wife at that time. I forget who. But then later on, we got to see. We found out he mentioned the wife, Janet Bailey, who we got to see the scene from her point of view. It turned out she was the angel. She was the mother of the little kid who grew up to walk into the recruiting office, that the recruiting officer was the little kid many years ago who saw the angel. And we just got to see him meeting Janet Bailey in the street, and he drew it just in such with a light behind her, and it was just such a beautiful, like, 2 pages. You could see why this kid thought she was an angel.
That's cool.
I did not see the interview on Comics Experience. No, I missed to check it out. Well, I was really happy with it. And the storytelling in it was just so good.
That's good.
And it actually also reminded me of. I don't like to compare comic books to movies very much, but it kind of reminded me of an old-fashioned black and white movie. Something with lots of like characters talking and psychological stuff going on, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? A movie that was based on a play kind of thing. Because there's so many moving parts and interaction between the parts, but cool. Not as depressing as Justin Bieber being the new lead singer of the Black Sabbath revival. Are you trolling, Scott?
Yes. He's trying very, very hard. Yeah. I would be depressed if Justin Bieber was
definitely worth $40,
including himself. Yeah.
Or $24 that someone paid on Amazon for it.
What about Robert Smith? Would you like Robert Smith to be the vocalist for a Black Sabbath revival?
No. I don't even want to hear Robert Smith sing The Cure. You know? I always thought they sounded more like The Disease. You know? Having said that, Robert Smith's appearance was a huge influence in what Morpheus from Sandman ended up looking like.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you ever get those trades of Uber, Daisy?
I did not yet. There's the last things that I got at the local comic store were, let's see, Moonstress, the graphic novel Moonstress.
Oh, Monstrous. Is that volume 1?
Yeah, Monstrous. Sorry, I keep using them. That is volume 1, and so I can finally get to episode 3. We got Resident Alien.
Okay.
Is currently being read by others in the house, and
I liked Resident Alien. I read some of that. I read it on Hoopla.
Yep, I heard that the book is really good, and I love the show. So
the show is way different than the book. The show is a comedy. The book is more like a 1970s a mystery, detective show, I would say.
Also good. That's
yeah.
way up my alley. And I got this weird one that I had eaten. Maybe you guys have already been through it, but I'd never heard of it. Sharky, and I only got it.
Mm-hmm.
I only got it because I happen to like the artwork. Like, It's got kind of a, like, in places it's got kind of a Mobius sort of look to the artwork.
Who does it?
Interesting.
And this would be Mark Miller and Simone. Sorry,
Simone Bianchi.
Blanky.
Yeah, and it's a bounty hunter. It's the bounty hunter.
So Mark Miller is doing actually interesting comics?
I like it. It's cute. I mean, it's cute. It's stupid. It's, it is. It's just,
I know. A couple of years ago, I actually bought an interesting Mark Miller comic.
I bought some too. I found about a third of his comics interesting.
Starlight was interesting.
Yep, yeah. It was. I just bought it for the art, but found it to be kind of interesting. So
I don't know if
I got Firefly.
Oh, okay. Which Firefly is that?
Say again.
Which Firefly is that? What's the title?
It's the Legacy Edition, Book 1.
What is it?
It's just Firefly, as far as I know. I haven't done.
Is it just a straight adaptation of the TV series?
As far as I can tell, but I don't know.
Okay.
Because there've been a lot of there've been a bunch of Firefly series over the years now. And they all have different titles, so I don't know which one is which. I have some of them.
This one doesn't have a specific.
I really like the Jupiter's Legacy comic, but I have not watched the show yet. I'm going to. I puked the 5. I pulled the 5-book run of Sharky out of the dollar bin for the same reason. The art, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's.
I don't know if I'd say Starlight was interesting, but I bought it and liked it.
I liked it.
Yeah, I did like it, but it was kind of, that was one of my. I sometimes call Mark Miller the master of the expected. Because there's never any twists in a Mark Miller story.
So he's the
story.
Smallen guy.
You wanted it kind of made you think that there was going to be a twist, but then there isn't.
Then there isn't.
Well,
exactly.
I like that better. I hate twist endings.
That's which is why I think it was The Magic Order was the last thing I read by his just a couple years ago, and I was enjoying it. And there was a twist ending, and I was like baffled. I was like, "What? A twist ending in a Mark Miller story? That's just crazy." Because, like, I really liked the Jupiter Legacies comic, the one with Frank Quitely that he drew. But he would even, like, in that one, he'd telegraph his moves.
Wow.
Yeah. But then he and Frank Quitely would pull them off, and it'd be, like, exciting. You know what's coming, but they did it in an exciting manner, so it was good.
Yeah, the one I bought was Reborn, which is like when people die, they go to another dimension, and they all become super people. And I bought the story because it was drawn by Greg Capullo.
Yeah, if he gets a good art, like the Frank Quitely, I think is good, and that's where he does it. But I've read other things by him where I'm like, it just doesn't interest me. But like I said, I think he's a good, he's a good writer. But like I said, I call him the master of the expected because don't expect any twist endings from his straightforward.
Back when he started Miller World, I bought the Unfunnies because I thought it was going to be funny. I thought it was going to have British humor. No, it's actually unfunny. It was made to be unfunny. The title says it.
And I didn't know
it's supposed to annoy you. It's like you have cartoon characters doing things that would be disgustingly criminal in the real world, and you think it's going to be funny because it's with cartoon characters, but it isn't. It really is unfunny.
Oh, you just described Deadpool.
No, Deadpool is like an Adam Sandler movie.
I can tolerate Adam Sandler. I can't tolerate Deadpool.
and Bunch pointed out to me once. He said, "And Frank Quitely, his obvious, is an obvious pen name." And I went, "It is? I missed the obvious."
Quite frankly, did you?
Yeah, quite frankly, I missed that it was an obvious pen name.
I'm today years old and just now found that out. I had no idea that was
because how many comic book artists use pen names anymore? Tula Lute is a pen name too.
Who is?
Tula Lute is a pen name. Don't even know her. Her name is like Christine something or something like that. She's got, a normal English name. I think she's from England.
Gotcha.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's a. But how many people call him Frank Quietly? Always amazes me.
No, I think all his friends call him Vince.
I hear people say Frank Quietly all the time. I'm like, what?
Those are the same people who say foliage.
Instead of foliage?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's Tim. Yeah.
Oh.
That's Tim. Oh, by the way, did you see that funny moment? You mentioned Deadpool before. That funny moment on my Facebook wall the other day when Tim, I can't remember what I was talking about. But Tim wrote some comment about how he likes the Deadpool movies but can't stand the Deadpool comics. And then Bunch came on and agreed with him. Then after that, Fabian Nicieza came on and said, well, who cares what you guys think about Deadpool? And then gave him a little smiley face. Tim was like, Tim's not used to...
Right.
No, but Fabian's right about Deadpool, and Fabian had the right idea about Deadpool when he inherited the character from Liefeld, because he's supposed to be an asshole. He thinks it's funny. Nobody else thinks it's funny. The audience is not supposed to think it's funny. The audience is supposed to acknowledge that he thinks it's funny and like him as the asshole that he actually is. And when Joe Kelly did the ongoing series and turned him into a walking joke, it completely changed Deadpool. Deadpool became cuddly, and that's not what it's supposed to be.
Right. He's supposed to be deadly.
Over the years, Cthulhu has become cuddly when he shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And let's see the next comic I got. I'm
going to buy Cthulhu plushie one of these days.
It's exactly what you're talking about. Man.
Our Italian comic here, being published by Image Comics, that we think is for the U.S. market. Nice, once again, nice. This is just a well-crafted, nicely done comic. Post-apocalyptic adventure.
Oh,
is there a comic these days that isn't post-apocalyptic?
What was that?
I said, is there a comic these days that isn't post-apocalyptic?
Not in my pull list. They all
Deadpool.
And this episode, they were underwater and they're discovering things. I don't know.
Cool.
I think they're going to discover eventually what caused the apocalypse, but it was fun. I mean, this is one of those, if you read it, you'll have fun. It's well done. I'd call this, it's just so well crafted.
And it's called Deep Beyond.
Deep Beyond. This is the first 4 issues. It's going to be a 12-issue series. These are the first 4. And it's like it's not breaking any new ground. It's just well done.
I know. So, the topic interests me.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
If people try to do more well done stories instead of trying to break new ground all the time, they'd actually make more interesting product.
Yeah, I don't even think they're trying to break new ground. I shouldn't even say that. They're trying to give you a hook.
Yeah.
I think a lot of they come up with a hook and then try to build around it.
And then do a twist.
Yeah, and so it's like, what if we made the female Deadpool? And that's the hook. They come up and they don't really have a story. They don't really craft a story around the hook. I think that's different than breaking new ground would be fun if it was well crafted, but they come up with a hook and then don't have a well crafted story around that hook. But right. They got to do something. Now let's see the next one I got here is the return of Howard Chaykin's Hey Kids comics.
Cool.
If you like the history of comics, this is good stuff. If you don't like the history of comics or don't know anything about the history of comics, this might confuse the hell out of you.
But is the story well crafted now? Because I agree with Damien that the first volume, it was a pain to follow.
First of all, here's what I'd like to say about the first volume. I missed the first volume on the shelves. I read it digitally and thought it was okay. Then the second volume, this is like last year they announced the second volume was coming out. And I said, you know what? I want the first volume as comics. So I went on eBay, bought volume 1 as individual comics. When I read them as individual comics, I really liked them. And I think one of the reasons I really liked them is he gives you a key of characters in the beginning. And whenever I'd get stuck going, because there's such a huge cast of characters, he doesn't introduce them. And he changes and it flips between the 40s, the 60s, and the 90s.
Right.
And he doesn't tell you that. You have to be able to pick up on that maybe he does date stuff. That one says 1970. But you have to be able to pick up on which character, and he switches, like he does things like right here. He switches between time periods and characters on one page. And anytime I would get stuck, I just flip back and go, oh, that's the Stan Lee guy. Oh, that's the Jack Kirby guy. Yeah. And that was so much easier. I liked it so much better as a comic than I did as a digital comic.
You saying that, I was going to think, I wonder if somebody has done like a Jess Nevins style book where there's annotations like this character in the book is actually an analogy for this person in real life.
Right. That would, because he doesn't, but it's like you have to figure out that Morris Alderstein of Verve Comics is Stan Lee. GW Publications is DC. Paul Gertz and Paul Gertz is like Mort Weisinger. I don't even remember who he was. Right. Then there's Yankee Comics is EC Comics. And so they've got Bill Gaines Jr. in here. Then they've got all these artists, like one is Gil Kane, and he's got like Simon and Kirby, but they're two different. He's got Ted Whitman, who I'm not sure. He's like the one black guy in here. So I think he was, what's his name?
Matt Baker.
Matt Baker. But he lived to the 90s in this. So Matt Baker died young.
Yeah.
There's like Benita Heindel, who's like the one woman in it, who I think was Marie Severin, but maybe not. Maybe it was Ramona Fredone. I'm not sure if there's exact parallels to everyone. But I noticed this issue was particularly well crafted and structured in terms of its storytelling. Just because I don't know why, but there's also stuff like you can tell it's Bill Gaines and stuff because he gives you instead of Mad Magazine, it's Whack. And they give you other EC Comics stuff. So that this one seemed to me easier, and it was so well laid out. There's more of a geometric grid on this one than there seemed to be on the other one.
Is there a Robert Wortham
parallel? Yes, there is. That's okay. What's his name? The Lynch Mob. They're down the bottom. There's the Lynch Mob. There's Senator Eustace Cleghorn, Texas Democrat, walks the way the Dixie wind blows. I'm sure I can't remember who it was that was the senator or House guy who grilled. So he's in there. There's Dr. Martin Westgate, who's Dr. Wortham. And there's Yoshel Tubakin, who I think is the publisher of Wortham's. So it's like, if you don't know comics history,
it'll confuse
you might be a little lost in this. But, but for us, and there's also there's this great scene where it starts the first 5 pages are kids reading comics, and then there's another 2 or 3. I think there's kids reading comics in the 1970s, which is kind of cool. And then there's kids reading comics in like the 1950s. And I was wondering how this was I'm like, why is he giving us, there's like this page right here is 3 young comics fans in the 1950s. And you can tell we think of you always hear of, when we talk about like newsstand comics and, people didn't take care of their comics on the newsstand, therefore they're more valuable. Here are 3 kids in the 1950s. And they know what's supposed to come out which week. And I always say that we knew that in the 70s, too. Yeah. You knew the X-Men was supposed to come out the second week of the month. And if it wasn't there, you were like, what's going on? And so this whole page is about the kids trying to figure out, why is this comic like? Where's this comic supposed to be out this week? And they even have one of the things in here is in the beginning was also about Captain Marvel going out of business, where DC and part of the settlement of that lawsuit between DC and Fawcett was No More Captain Marvel comics. And one of these kids is on the newsstand going, "Where's the Marvel family? It was supposed to be out this week." And the newsstand guy going, "No more. They're out of business." So it was an interesting little insight into the kids buying the comics, finding this stuff out. But then we also get a payoff where we get some Frederick Wortham stuff, and then we get the where's the page? Then we get the book burnings, and we get the same three kids sad because their mothers are at the book burning their comics. And the kids are just like, and you feel for them, of course. You're just like, ah.
Too bad there was no Johnny Cochran back then, because I would have sued my mother if she did
that. But real good stuff. I very much enjoyed this issue. Hey Kids Comics.
I wasn't allowed to buy comics when I was a kid.
You weren't allowed?
Nope.
What mean parents you had.
Yep, comics weren't for girls. I could read my cousin's comics, but I couldn't.
But they did give her a horse, so I guess it evened out.
I bought my own horse, thank you very much.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's not the best of town, is it?
Country to a
but they did get me loads of unicorns and rainbows and stuff like that, so I suppose.
These comics were for boys.
Yeah, I wanted all the way up until I was like in my late teens and early 20s. I kept asking for power tools for Christmas. Power tools
Architectural foam panels and columns, like the first volume. Yeah, like I said, Paolo, did you already lay out your superhero parody?
Oh yeah, almost forgot about that part. I was wondering if well, I kind of didn't really lay out, but I was wondering if reconstructivist comics are parodies like deconstructionist comics are.
Huh? Reconstructionist comics? You mean taking a comic that already exists and moving it into a new form?
Well, as I think I said that Quietly Air is kind of a parody, kind of makes parodies of superheroes, but I couldn't reconcile it with the idea of All-Star Superman, because it's not a parody. It's actually a very genuine take on what Superman can do and should do. So it's not deconstructionist, and the way that they during the mid-90s, when they were starting to do decent superheroes again, when Warren Ellis did Stormwatch, and then Grant Morrison started the JLA, and after that, plus Starman and the Golden Age by James Robinson. The Golden Age was the first real reconstructionist comic, the one that made superheroes this is what superheroes are supposed to be, and we can integrate the critique that were Watchmen and American Flag and martial law. You can integrate that into a perspective where superheroes can be a force for good, and that's what you had in the Golden Age and Morrison's JLA. And the thing is, while we were kind of talking about artists, I said Quietly is a bit of a parody of a parody artist when it comes to drawing stuff. If we take into account what he did, for example, with Flex Mantello. But when he's working with Grant Morrison on New X-Men, I don't think that Morrison's New X-Men was a superhero comic. It's more science, but it's more science fiction, and it is reconstructionist of the notion of how mutants are supposed to operate in a world. They're not supposed to hide out in Xavier's mansion and then just come out to fight Magneto in Apocalypse. The Morrison's take that mutants would be cool, they would be hot commodities, is a correct one. And obviously the first arc was done by Frank Whiteley, and that helped the Morrison's New X-Men series be a strong seller, having Morrison as an artist, having Whiteley as an artist. So when you have Quietly doing X-Men, which is no longer a superhero comic, and later doing All-Star Superman, which is what a superhero, the distilled notion of what superheroes are supposed to be, I'm kind of wondering if you can consider reconstructionism as a sort of parody. But then the reconstruction is supposed to be candid. So if you think of it as being mostly of a parody element, it's no longer candid. It's no longer true. And I think that when Morrison does his take on superheroes, is being true to what superheroes are supposed to be.
Yeah, I don't think that really fits in the definition of what a parody is.
Yeah.
I think what you mean by reconstructionist is a renewed, earnest belief that superheroes are good.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's post-deconstructionist, but when you deconstructed the stories, what are you supposed to do with the toys? You build them back up. So.
Perfect example.
Yeah, I don't think reconstructionist would be parody.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect example of that would have been New Frontier from Darwin Cook.
Right.
I still haven't read that.
Oh, it's so
everyone
good.
loves it. I've never read that
so
one.
Good.
Yeah. You're going to read that while listening to Black Sabbath.
That's and by the way, if Gore Vidal disappears off the face of the earth, I had nothing to do with it. If it happens to happen, it wasn't me.
And the last two comics I got this week have my name in them.
Ooh.
There's ENIAC #3. This is some good Matt Kint. And you get male full frontal nudity.
Ooh. Hangs dong.
It continues the story by Matt Kint and Doug Braithwaite about, I think there's one more issue. This is 4 issues with its unreadable logo. There's ENIAC 3.
Still better than the logo they use for Rain Like Hammers.
Yeah. Love the book, don't love the logo.
Yeah, same thing.
But,
continuing the adventures of the most deceitful calculator in the world.
Yep, continues the adventure. The ENIAC is the first computer, and it's taken over the world. And it turns out it's had control of the world's nuclear arsenal since like the 70s or something like that. But it's been a fun story. And what's interesting too, and ENIAC's still a step ahead. As in order to defeat it, they're trying something where one of the guys who helped build wrote a computer program with string and knots. So somehow they're going to defeat ENIAC with strings and knots.
That makes sense.
They wrote a binary program with it.
Well, just ask
but I know there used to be, I forget which South or Central American culture actually their writing was in knots.
Right.
I forget which ones they are.
I remember which one it was.
But they kept
cultural again.
But that's how they kept track of their records until the Spanish burned most.
Asking the obvious question: why didn't they just cut power to the computer?
Because it's not there, and they tried that, but because
there's no internet. Where
is it getting its power from?
That's why my friend Rob refuses to read it. But
where did it go? There's no internet.
Pull the plug.
I don't know. There was some explanation. There's some explanation. I can't remember what it is. But see, I always find it interesting where people draw their lines. Like my friend Rob didn't like that one because it annoyed him. He's like, ENIAC wasn't even, it was just a big calculator. There's no way it could take over the Earth. And it's like, yeah, but guys with magic rings are fine. It's like where people draw their lines. And I can't remember which one it was that there's some other one where, what was that?
If you give a comic to a 5-year-old and they can point out the weak points in your plot, you may want to rethink your story.
Yeah, but every plot, I mean, all superhero stories take a suspension of disbelief.
Oh yeah.
Although a 5-year-old could not point out the flaws in ENIAC because a 5-year-old does not know what it's like to live without the internet.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Magic calculators, though. Yeah, that's what it is. It's a magic calculator.
Yeah, the Texas Instrument calculators.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one I got, which surprised me at how good it was. It's funny how I can do the production on a comic and never read it. Even though I'm making lettering corrections and changes and looking at all the art, I just never actually read it until I get the final comic. And that's one of these. Which is a $10 comic here. It's a square-bound one. Where it's 2 stories. It's Whalesville by Matt Kint and Adam Polina, and Rocks and Minerals by Matt Kint and Tony Millionaire. And they're very fairy tale oriented. Huh. And they're really well done. The first one is about it appears to be a crab, a anglerfish that lives in a plastic bag. So he's got a water-filled plastic bag that is anglerfish. It's very fairy tale-ish.
Oh, I love
What was that?
I said I love anglerfish. I'm in. Okay.
And pardon me, he's also on the anglerfish is in a plastic bag and sitting on a roller skate. So he's on kind of dry land. Then there's the crab. Then there's what appears to be some sort of seahorse. I don't know what this is really. And they don't say, and they don't. I have to show you this drawing just because it's kind of cool. This thing right here, the purple thing.
Oh, it is a seahorse. It's a I forget what they're called, but it is a species of seahorse.
It is a seahorse. Right. And there's also a crow. And they live in this cave, a little town in it.
Sure.
Where sometimes the tide comes in and brings things to them. And the tide comes in and brings in a little boy. And that's all they know of the world is this cave. And they're very amusing little fairy tale creatures.
Right.
What is this book called again? I gotta write it down.
It's called Whalesville and Rocks and Minerals.
Now, see, Tim would never read that book just because Tony Millionaire did Sock Monkey.
Yeah. And then actually, this is the Adam Polinos art. And I really enjoyed it. There's more fairy tale. I won't tell you the whole plot of it because it's about them exploring the world and figuring out what it was.
Gotcha.
See, Adam Polina is another example of an artist who really doesn't shine in superheroes like he shines doing something else.
Yeah, he was. I remember him being one of those X-Men, those later '90s X-Men guys, and
yeah, he was on X-Force.
His art here is really nice.
That's an interesting.
But also the Matt Kint Tony Millionaire story. I guess this could be considered post-apocalyptic because something happened that they call the big polishing that wiped all the humans off the earth.
That's not a euphemism.
And so now there's like animated Rocks and Minerals.
Are they Italian?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, because if all the humans were polished, yeah.
But what's funny, they also tell the story of before the big polish, where they were oppressed because the humans all took them and made them into buildings and made them into jewelry and smashed them up and made them into roads.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's this whole, post-human kingdom of rocks and minerals. And the story is about, and they kind of live in this one little area with a queen who doesn't let them go out of the area. And then one day they discover a turtle.
Aww.
And so now they're trying to help the turtle get back to his pond. They don't even know what a pond is. And they think the turtle's another kind of rock.
I was going to mention that if they were able to disseminate whether the turtle was, animal or mineral. Interesting.
Is Jared frozen?
Yeah, he froze.
He froze in a great position, though. He's like,
He froze like a rock.
yeah.
I'm going to have to leave and come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could have left that picture though.
It was a great picture. Every time Jared posts like the comics he bought this week or whatever, every single time, I don't know if everybody gets the same still shot, but every time I see the still shot, it's always like he's always making some weird expression.
Now my camera's gone entirely.
Let me just take the time to answer Foam Panel's question here. I didn't get the time to address it before. What do I find parodic about Quitely's art? I'd say it's the way that he portrays musculature and chins. There's a bit of an exaggeration there, especially when coupled with the tendency that Quitely has to pose the characters as classical Greek statues.
That's something that always bugged me about Star Trek comics is you had a superhero artist drawing the things and you give them like these ridiculous musculatures. Like those characters don't look like that.
Yeah, especially Picard.
Yeah. Or Luke Skywalker, was another.
Oh man.
Oh my God, yeah. He was. Although I do love the. It was one of those posters was done by. Wasn't it done by the Prince? And the original 1970.
That one was done by Howard Chaykin.
That was done by the one where Luke is like.
Oh no, that one was done by either depending on which one you're talking about, was either Hildebrand or Tom Young. I'm
pretty sure it was the Hildebrand one that I like.
He had a very superhero kind of a body. Yeah.
Yep. It's
Martin was not built like that. Yeah.
He did not look like that, but for some reason,
a great poster though. Yeah.
I think that was the first Star Wars thing that I ever saw, though.
I had that poster. Yeah, I sure did. Yep. Yeah.
I did too. Yep. Oh, he's back.
My camera cut out completely.
Aw.
I just grabbed another webcam.
Because you have just a stock of webcams.
I do. Hey, I even got my new document webcam that I'm going to do drawing videos with that I haven't been. Let me show you that one that I haven't.
I can't wait to see that. I mean, I think I've seen the camera, but.
Yeah, I got this.
Yeah, yeah. That's going to be good. By the way, I'd like to thank whoever it was that mentioned Drinky Crow beforehand. I completely forgot about Drinky Crow. I love the artwork on that. I mean, I love the show, but itself because it was just ridiculous. But the artwork on it was just really cool too.
So I don't like to pronounce just therefore parody. Yeah, it's typical of Quitely, and he has a tendency to abuse it. Even on characters where. Like on Cyclops, it kind of doesn't really work. But it's like I said, it's not just the chins. It's the chins and the musculature and the posing that kind of looks like Greek statues. So
basically you just described the Tick.
Well, the Tick is a parody.
He is, and it's the ultimate pronounced chin parody, too.
Yeah. I think that Quitely has a bit of fun when he's drawing all the characters like that. It's like it's poking a bit of fun. I would say that.
And Whalesville Rocks Minerals might actually be hard to get too, because every comic store can't order them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're doing this thing where only they're only selling them to like 300 comic stores or something like that.
Oh, really? Did you get yours at your comic store?
Yeah, my comic store has them. And there's going to be a second printing.
You're out of luck.
Because this is an error copy. In the first printing, there's down here is supposed to be the Bad Idea logo, and it fell. It didn't print due to weird technical glitch that I've never seen before.
Interesting.
Was it in the PDF?
It was in the PDF, yes.
Interesting. I don't mind a second printing. whatever.
Yeah. But
So it's
what it was
because there's an error in the first printing. Does that make the not first printing the real first printing now?
I don't know. We'll have to see what the market says.
If it was a book, it would technically be the first printing. I mean, I make corrections on like books, like novels, all the time, where it's just, you know, people write in or somebody notices a typo or something else, and second printing is fixed.
That's why you have advanced reader copies.
But sometimes for comics, they catch the error, fix it, but some error books still get out.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not stamps. they don't really care.
Right.
It's not U.S. government currency, so.
Right. Yep.
What is this? Curious what you think of Ramon Villabos's work, since he is doing a book for Bad Idea and is deeply in depth. Which one is he doing? I just saw his name, but I don't remember which book Ramon Villabos is on. I'm
not as familiarized with. I think I remember it had a style that was similar to Quietly's. That's not necessarily bad, but it might be good. I'm not familiarized. I'll take a look at it. Sense of visual storytelling and something. Yeah. That's definitely the thing that's most attractive about Quietly. He has a sense of scale that I haven't seen since maybe Don Lawrence.
Yeah, he does have a really good sense of scale. Which I think, Walter Simonson wrote something about recently. He's like, for scale, I always just drew something really small down in the corner or something like that, he said. Because he has a good sense of scale. He's like, that was always my trick.
Drawing a certain fortress that showed up in Ragnarok, and he's like, I hope I don't have to draw that again.
Yeah. But yeah. I know I just recently put his name in the credits somewhere, but I haven't seen. I can't remember which book he's going to be doing. I'll have to look. What did for what's his name? Villabos. I'll have to look. Quietly style seems deeply indebted to his predecessors. I think everybody is, especially in superheroes. But what I find interesting about Quietly style too, the fact that I always try to find the most basic definitions of things to help me understand what they were, and like the most basic definition I can come up with for drawing is to put lines on paper in an interesting way. That's the most basic definition I can come up with. And some people, and the word interesting in there could be tricky. I don't think the word interesting is relative, but I think it has context. Meaning that, let's just say you're a big fan of, I don't know. Who's the guy? You're a big fan of Tom Scioli's Godland. You're like, I really like the way Tom Scioli drew Godland. And you're like, well, if you like that, you have to see Jack Kirby's work, because somebody who's never seen Jack Kirby's work, who first sees Tom Scioli's work in Godland,
right,
will see it completely differently when he sees Jack Kirby's work. Not that it's relative to Jack Kirby's work, but it has context. You could still like Tom Scioli's work as much as you ever did, but once you see Jack Kirby's work, you will now have a different context for viewing Tom Scioli's work.
Right.
And I think Frank Quitely is like that too. He is indebted to his lot of predecessors, but he makes it interesting in a way a lot of people don't. And I was, and a lot of his storytelling and a lot of his drawing, how he puts his line down. I was looking at his, because I always considered him one of the. He's not just defending. I'm one of those books that dragons or dinosaurs in it, but I couldn't find the. I'm gonna have to look up what book that is because I know I've seen his name in the Bad
I'm not
Ideas.
familiar with his work at all, so I'm not really sure what his work looks like.
Yeah, I don't know him at all. That's why I can't remember which book he did. But what Frank Quitely does, that's because like I said, I like Scott Collins, the artist. What did he do? Flash and a lot of. He's one of the single line weight guys, and I think he's one of the guys who popularized it too. I think Quitely made it even more popular. But if you look at Quitely's work, it isn't really as single line weight as I thought it was. Not that his lines have a lot of weight, but some of them are a little bit thicker than others, and I think that makes it interesting.
Kind of like Seth Fisher.
Yes. He's another one of those single line weight guys.
Yeah, they were
no one's dissing Quitely.
They were heavily influenced by European artists that use that technique too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially
I'd say Collins is closer to American cartoonists than he is to Quitely.
Scott Collins, yeah. But like I said, I used to put Quitely more in the single line weight camp than I do now.
Mm-hmm.
When I kind of looked at him more closely, it's like Scott Collins is in the single line weight camp. He really uses a single line. Matter of fact, they shoot from his pencils a lot, where he inks that single line weight with a pencil.
I wouldn't trust anybody that has the first name Scott and their last name begins with a CO. So.
And gets confused with Scott Koblish all the time.
There's another artist that goes by Scott C, and I don't remember what his last name actually is.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't link Quitely to Moebius.
I do.
I don't know why. Maybe I think it's the imagery. Maybe they are sort of
line. It's just a certain line quality. It makes me think of.
Yeah, that might be. Their imagery is so different, though. That might be why I don't link the two.
I'd put Quitely closer to the link. If we're talking to seeing a link to French comics, I put him more in the Linclair camp, like Linclair on steroids.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think I know him. So
Damien brought up an interesting point. I never thought of that before. He's talking about Barry Windsor Smith. Barry Windsor Smith really started out in a Jack Kirby style.
Okay? Yeah, he did.
But for somebody who as influential as Barry Windsor Smith is, can you think of any people that aped his style over the years? And I can't.
No, that's another strange. Yeah, that's another strange one. I don't think there's been a lot lately.
I mean, obviously Kelly Jones got his style from Bernie Wrightson,
right?
But I can't think of anybody that really kind of came from the Windsor Smith kind of school of drawing.
Well, I think because it's so hard.
Well, yeah.
That's what it is.
Easy, but it's so hard.
And the same thing with Michael Kaluta. I don't see any imitators of Kaluta either because it's so hard to do that.
Those 70s guys were all about being illustrative.
Right. But
that went away.
But I can think of a couple different people who really came from the Jeff Jones painterly style.
That's not being illustrative. That's because one of the things about that painterly style is you can do it quickly if you learn it.
Right.
You can't do Barry Windsor Smith quickly ever.
I'm just saying I can think of a couple guys that work in that style, which reminds me of Jones, and I don't see that in a couple of other artists,
I remember hearing stories in the 80s about who it was. Kent Williams. I think he learned that style from somebody. He was like, let me show you. Because that sort of that John J. Muth. I think John J. Muth taught it to Kent Williams, was it? But like I said, that painterly style, it takes practice and it takes talent.
I love it.
But you can learn to do it, and when you do it well, you can do it quickly. What was that, Daisy?
Oh, I just said I love John G. Muth stuff.
Yeah,
I can.
Right, I can put Bo Hampton in that category too.
I think Bo Hampton was a little more illustrative, though. He had a little more
that's
drawing
true.
in it. So I think that's why you can copy that style easier than you can copy Barry Windsor Smith.
Right, but it's interesting that we go back to these what we call powerhouse artists.
Yeah.
Like there's some that are copied ridiculously. Like Neil Adams has got tons of clones, but there are others that you just don't see many copies of. It's kind of funky. So I don't see Byrne. I don't see Byrne in Quietly's work at all.
I think I understand what he means.
Yeah.
In that there's sort of a formula to it. There's
Let's see if Man the Comics agrees with me. Quietly lifts a little bit of Rosinski.
Okay. Being that we don't know who Rosinski is,
he's the artist. He's the artist on the French series Targal.
Yeah.
Okay, I know who that is. He's not Chuck Rosinski. We know that.
Gregor Rosinski. He's a Polish artist who mostly works for the French market.
Right.
Here's where I think Quietly reminds me of Byrne. I think I once had an art teacher tell me, "You can draw as if everything is made out of different substances, meaning that a tree is made out of wood." A brick is made out of stone, person is made out of flesh,
right.
A shirt is made out of fabric. So you need sort of a different approach to each thing. Or another sort of idiosyncratic way that people have is everything in the universe is made out of the same stuff. So you treat a rock like you treat someone's face. I think that's what Quietly even more than Byrne, both. Everything in a Byrne comic is made out of the same substance, a John Byrne drawing. Same thing with, who's really to that way to extreme too?
To me, it would be Richard Corbin.
Richard Corbin's that way too. And, what's his name? The guy who Brian Hitch stole from. Excalibur.
Alan Davis?
Oh, Alan Davis.
Alan Davis. And in Alan Davis comic, everything is made out of the same substance.
Yeah, it's all rubbery.
Yeah. In a Frank Quitely comic, everything is made out of the same substance. And that's sort of that's rarer than people who draw everything made out of different substances. Right. And I think John Byrne does that to an extent. Not quite as much as some of these other guys, but I think and I think
John
he does.
Byrne, you never really know what the walls are made of in a John Byrne drawing.
You're right. But all the figures are made of the same stuff. I think John Byrne has sort of I hesitate to call it a formula, but he has a specific way he draws all figures.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the same. Like if Frank Miller were to draw a young fat kid, an old skinny woman, a superhero, they'd all be drawn in their own little weird way.
Right.
If John Byrne were to draw the same cast of characters, they'd all have a similarity to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think I could also say that George Perez is like that as well.
George Perez is like that too.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a superhero thing too.
And
you're used to drawing superheroes. But then like Quietly takes it one step further, where everything in the universe is drawn out of that one substance. Same with Alan Davis. Everything in the universe is drawn with.
I'd apply that to Jeff Darrow too.
Yeah, Jeff Darrow too. Mm-hmm. Funny, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And they might not be. Artists have influences they don't know they have. I know I do.
Some of them do.
I can remember one time.
Really know who their influences are too.
Yeah, you don't always. I can remember one time Dean Haspiel described one of my comic stories as Herb Trimpe by the way of the East Village.
That's interesting.
And I never saw any Herb Trimpe in my work before. And I looked at it and went, you know what? I think he's got something there. I never considered Herb Trimpe an influence. He was never one of my favorite guys. But I looked at that story and I went, you know what? I can see what he's talking about. So you don't always know.
Yeah, it's like when Stephen Grant used to say in his column at Comic Book Resources that everybody cribbed from Gil Kane and nobody acknowledged it.
Right.
It's like people don't know that they're cribbing from Kane because a lot of figure work and posing is not taken from Kirby; it's taken from Kane.
Right.
But yeah, people don't acknowledge it. It's because it's sort of it's not a recognizable style. It's little bits of technique.
Yeah. Right. It's like fashion drawings. All the mentioned artists have personal, consistent elegance to their line. Yeah. There's some, but they also use the same line for everything. Kind of thing. That's their idea of how the world is made. It's like they're not going to all of a sudden pull out another pen to do stuff with.
I could almost see that even going back to Alex Raymond.
Yeah. And you can see a lot of Milton Caniff is in a lot of comics too. Not so much as he used to be in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, but he's one of the big guys.
Yeah.
Barry Windsor Smith also had some Steranko. Yeah, the early Nick Fury comics, Steranko had that long, thin nose face. Barry Windsor, he could ape a lot of styles, but he loved Kirby. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Barry Windsor, I think it was Sleepy Reader who was just saying recently that he was disappointed to learn that Barry Windsor Smith didn't always enjoy drawing. And I think because that style he does is labor intensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look at what Gary Gianni does. How much more labor intensive can you get?
Yeah.
And what Bernie Wrightson did on Frankenstein, that's as labor intensive as art
Right.
gets, you know.
That's why they a lot of times I've heard, I don't know how true this is, I just remember hearing it back then that he had a breakdown after Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things too, when you do your magnum opus that early in your career, then you're spending the rest of your life trying to live up to something that you just can't do.
Yeah. Because you can't draw that way.
It's not fair to the artist to have that stigma over them for the rest of their life.
I'd like to know which British comic strips influenced Barry Windsor Smith, because he was bound to read comics in the newspaper.
I'm sure if you found enough interviews, you could probably find one where he talks about it. I'm not really sure.
Because sometimes the way he drew Conan kind of reminded me of Steve Dowling's Garth, and Garth is one of those comic strips that's now forgotten, and it wasn't very popular outside the UK, but it was in the newspaper that my dad used to buy. Of course, it wasn't Dowling anymore; it was 40-year difference. But
I'm sure he saw it growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Quietly had to be influenced by those 2000 AD guys, I would imagine. Yeah. That is the Comics Experience interview. Comics Experience, man. I still haven't read my issue of Love and Rockets from last week, too. I think I left before I showed it, but there was a new Love and Rockets.
Slacker.
Well, that's because it's so long between issues. I'm like, I'm in no hurry to read Love. And also what's interesting is Jaime, I don't think Jaime usually draws big faces. He usually draws figures. So I was like, that looks unusual. That doesn't look like Jaime Hernandez. It's a big face over there and a big figure. But I don't think anyone who's not a longtime Love and Rockets fans can read these monthly magazines.
I get that. Yeah.
I think everybody else waits for the trade, and I understand that. Or if you're going to try Love and Rockets, picking up one of these is not the place to start.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if somebody was to read that wasn't familiar with that, was to read a very early issue of Love and Rockets and compare it to what it is now, they're very different.
Yeah.
I
got this a long time.
Oops, go back there. I got this years ago. Where's it? This is all the Jaime Hernandez Love and Rockets. There's 2 volumes. I have both of them. When did this come out? 2004. Wow, that came out a long time ago. Oh, this is 2007 printing of it. So I got it in 2007, I bet. But this is Maggie and Hopi of Love and Rockets. And when Love and Rockets first came out, like I knew some people who like weren't even that into comics, loved Love and Rockets. It was about these 2 punk rock girls living in LA. But in rereading, this is when I got this, and read it 13 years ago, it was the first time I read them all at once, because I jumped on it kind of late, and I had read it issue by issue. So this was the first time, and it surprised me how quickly he broke Maggie and Hopi up. They went in different directions, and it was that way for years, for a decade. So like it surprised me how long Maggie and Hopi weren't together as friends. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow. And he just kind of like, they got Maggie and Hopi got really popular, and then after a few issues, they were off on their own adventures. I was like, wow, I did not realize that. And I can remember my friends who were really into Love and Rockets, a couple of them, getting disillusioned with it because Maggie and Hopi weren't hanging out. And I'm like, wow, now I understood why they got disillusioned, because they really, he really kind of established something right away and then went away from it. It was interesting.
Also, in the earlier issues, there was a science fiction element, and that kind of went away quickly, too.
The very earliest one is called Love and Rockets because there was like Hopi or Maggie the mechanic. That was it, right? She was a rocket ship mechanic. And then they just did away with all those elements within an issue or 2. But this is a really good collection if you ever want to read Jaime's Love and Rockets stuff. Cool. It's excellent. I like it. I always say Jaime Hernandez is such a good storyteller that he named the whole story The Death of Speedy, and I was shocked when Speedy died.
What? No.
I just worked on a book that's called They Both Die at the End. And they both die at the end.
Yeah. And if it can be shocking when they both die, that you can tell there's a whoa Nelly. Yeah, that was one of his Mexican wrestling stories. I remember that one. Whoa Nelly.
Speaking of Mexican wrestling, I now have a desire to want to watch all the Santo movies. And they're going to be very different because they're just so goofy. They're so schlocky that's like, it's like an MST3 kind of 3K kind of thing. But finding them all is going to be a chore.
I was painting today, and I put on The Adventures of Robin Hood.
Oh,
I haven't had that one on in a long time.
Movie.
Yeah.
If people don't like that movie, I don't trust those people.
Yeah.
We just
here's some trivia. Okay, the horse that Olivia de Havilland was riding, that's Trigger.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Before he was known as Trigger.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's we saw a weird ass movie the other night called Willy's Wonderland, and it's a Nicolas Cage movie. He doesn't have a single line of dialogue in the whole movie. And
is that bad?
Oh, well, I personally will watch anything with Nicolas Cage in it just because I find him to be entertaining.
I watched a Nicolas Cage movie about a year or so ago that was called Drive Angry.
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of it, I could have been called it View Angry because that movie was awful. It was bad.
Some of it, a lot of his movies are really, really terrible. But
it really was.
That Jaime Hernandez book was called Locus, Locas. It's the complete Love and Rockets. There's 2 volumes of it. Does anybody know I don't recognize this Doctor Strange. When did Butch Geist do Doctor Strange? I think it was the late 80s from what I can tell. There's an Epic collection. It just caught my eye. Collecting Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme 14 through 33 and Ghost Rider 1990 number 12. And it's by Roy Thomas.
Yeah, it's around 1991 or 92.
Yeah. I don't remember any Doctor Strange from that era.
Yeah, Doctor Strange was canceled in 87, 88. Then he came back with a new Strange Tales. It wasn't a flip book, but the first half was Doctor Strange and the second half was Cloak and Dagger. That lasted for 19 issues. I have a trade with the Doctor Strange stories from that volume. And then Doctor Strange started with the new number 1, which was fully titled Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme.
Okay.
And I think Peter B. Gillis wrote the first issues, and then it's Roy Thomas with his wife. No, with the L'Officiers.
D. Thomas, L'Officier, Geist.
The only Doctor Strange I bought in the last 25, 30 years was a little mini series. I think there's only 2 issues of it. It was done by P. Craig Russell. It was What Is It That Disturbs You, Stephen?
That was one shot.
Okay. I couldn't remember if it was 1 or 2 issues, but
it's a retelling of the 1974 annual, isn't it?
Don't know.
Because that was also done by Russell.
It's possible. It could have been. Don't know.
And it surprises me how I continue to see Something Is Killing the Children issues being bought on like on YouTube and people's halls. People are like chasing all sorts of printings from that series. And they just had some special printing that was tied in with Berserker.
Oh.
Did you see that?
No.
It was like if you pre-ordered Berserker number 2, you got a special 8th printing of Something Is Killing the Children number 1 or 2 or something like that. So it was like people were chasing that Something Is Killing the Children 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I still see like on different people's channels them collecting Something Is Killing the Children. And it's like a lot of them are up to 3rd, 4th, 5th printings. It's crazy.
Is there anything in particular that's driving that? I mean, is it just a good...
I don't know. That's what I'm wondering. I read some of it on Hoopla, and it's a decent series, but I don't know what's driving it. It's just
are
weird.
speculators going after it?
Yes. Yeah.
Has it been tied in like an upcoming movie or TV production or something like that? Or?
I don't know. It's been going on. It got hot with issue 1, and it's still going on. That's what I'm saying is weird.
Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, you know what? What was the new Marvel character that they were trying to hype up with rumors that there was going to be a movie or something? Nightwatch.
Yeah. Yeah, Nightwatch, right.
Nightwatch.
It's like Once in Future, the one that I get and Sleepy gets. Must be from volume 2. I think 60 was Sorcerer. How long did Sorcerer Supreme go? 60 issues?
80, I think.
Wow, that's pretty long.
It was canceled in 96 when you guys went out of business.
Right. It was like nearly the same time as Something Is Killing the Children, maybe a couple months later. Once in Future, also from Boom, got hot, and I picked it up like because I wanted to read it, and I got like something like a 3rd printing of issue number 1, but then that was it. It was hot for a month, maybe 2, and then nothing. But Something Is Killing the Children continues. Oh, what is this here? If you bought Berserker 1 foil, it came with a coupon for Something Is Killing the Children number 1 8th printing. Or if you buy Berserker 2. Yeah, it was like something crazy. Yeah. Now, when you take the coupon out of the foil version of Berserker, is it no longer mint condition?
One of those Marvel stamp issues. Yeah.
Remember those Valiant coupons you had to tear out and mail in?
Wait, so in order to get a rare hot book, you have to destroy a rare hot book?
Yes.
I'd like to
That's
see speculators' head melt.
There's Darwinism there for you.
That's one of the ways Valiant in the early 90s. They would have like 5 books with coupons in them, and you had to tear out the coupons, no facsimiles accepted, and mail those into Valiant to get the 0 issue of something.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Boom has a lot of briefly hot creator-owned books lately. Yeah, which makes me wonder why Something is Killing the Children is not keeps on being hot.
You're gonna have to change the title. Something's killing my curiosity. Why?
I like that idea, pal. Yeah, that's what you have to do. You have to tear out. But I think the coupon came right in the Berserker book. You didn't have to tear it out; it was loose. I saw a couple people show it, and it didn't look like it was torn out. It looked like a lap flap.
Yeah, but if you send it with the coupon to CGC, I think that's the only way they're going to accept that it's a 9.8.
Yeah. How does CGC grade the code sticker, the digital code sticker in Marvel books, where you have to pull off the little tab to see the digital code? I've never seen anything. Now, I know that my local comic shop owner has told me, and he sells stuff on eBay too, that he has put stuff up on eBay, random comics, that people then complain that the sticker isn't there.
Okay.
Like he might be selling some random issue of the X-Men.
No.
And the person gets it and the digital sticker isn't there anymore and they're upset. So I know there's some people who think without that sticker on there, it's no longer complete.
Maybe that's what happened with that hardcover you were talking about the last time that had the square in the middle. Somebody just had to cut that out and send it into the publisher to get some sort of special promo item.
Yeah, it's a loose
the retailer.
coupon.
The coupon may be loose, but it comes with the comic. The retailers do not put things in magazines. It doesn't matter how specialized in comics they are. That's not something that they're going to waste time doing.
Huh. So I've never seen anyone say anything about the stickers that cover the digital code in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
And since they're stickers, they're eventually going to fail anyway.
Eventually, yeah.
Stickers don't stick
of
forever.
course, by that time, you can't use the code.
Well, it's not about using the code. That's what I'm saying. Because the codes expire in like a year or something.
A month.
It's not about using the code. It's about people who think the comic is incomplete if the sticker isn't there. Sort of like the tattoos in first Hobgoblin appearance. Spider-Man 239, is it? That has that comic is worth more because that comic, the first Hobgoblin appearance, came with temporary tattoos stapled in the book. So the book is worth more if the temporary tattoos are there. I wonder if eventually the stickers will be the same.
Now, if somebody had did a adaptation of Bradbury's The Illustrated Man, that would have been a great promo item for that.
Temporary tattoos.
Yeah.
Which Flash villain is it with the tattoos?
Oh, gosh.
I can't remember.
It's not,
CGC won't grade me.
I don't remember.
Man, was he a 60s or a 70s villain? I remember he'd touch a tattoo and his tattoo would come to life and fight the Flash.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
That's kind of
Whatever happened to that guy? I'm sure Grant
He had a
Morrison.
vertigo. No, I don't know. He didn't. But or did he? Man, now I don't remember. But he had a Vertigo miniseries in the 90s. Skin Graft, I think the name was. Well, it's kind of interesting. A Green Lantern villain for a Vertigo miniseries.
Ah.
Yeah, that's not typical. Yeah.
I'm the same way, but not everybody is. So I'm I wonder what. Like I said, I mean, I don't care if the sticker's missing or not, but I know somebody somewhere does.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I wonder how.
There's always
like
that guy.
And to me, the arbitrator of this is CGC. So I wonder how they handle it. Like, the wavy books. How does CGC handle Fear Case number 4? I don't know.
If I was CGC, you know what I'd say? What I would say if I was CGC, since they get a lot of modern books and they're all 9.8s.
Yeah.
So they're not rare. You know what's
Right.
rare? 9.4s.
Yeah.
A 9.4 should be
CGC
worth more than a 9.8 if it's a modern book.
CGC has a service where you can send them a case of new books, and they'll pull out the ones that are 9.8 and just grade those.
Mm.
So if you want 9.8s of the new Spider-Man number 1, you buy a case of it, send the case right to CGC, and they just pull out the ones that are 9.8s and slab them, and you get 10 9.8s, and the rest they just send back to you. How crazy is that's how rare 9.8s of new books are.
It's just
You can just send them and think of how that's easy money for CGC.
Seriously.
Yeah, that's true.
Because when you're looking for a 9.8 of a new book, all you got to do is look at the front and back cover. That's all. You don't have to page through them. You don't have to do any of that stuff.
Right.
You just have to look at the front cover, back cover. Perfect. Boom. Slab it. Perfect. Boom. Slab it. Nick, send it away. Nick, send it away. Oh, look at that thumbprint. Send it away. Perfect. Slab it. It takes if they look at a modern book for more than 5 minutes when they're doing that service, I'd be surprised. Because why would you?
Right.
Yeah, the foreign comics guys were complaining the other day in Facebook that they do a terrible service at identifying foreign editions.
I'd like to point out, as Lefty Blues here says, Locus is out of print, and of course it's expensive. When we were, I was watching some of Sleepy Reader and Comic Cracked and La Raza's this past Sunday, and they mentioned that Monsters, there might not be a lot. They mentioned something. Sleepy was saying, you should get it right away because might go out of print and then you won't find it. And somebody said, well, Fantagraphics is good at keeping their stuff in print. Obviously, they're not always good at keeping their stuff in print if they don't have Locus, the main place to go for Jaime Hernandez's Love and Rockets. So.
I think it also depends on what they perceive as the demand for the book too.
I pretty much think Monsters could easily go out of print if they're not keeping Locus in print.
Maybe.
Yeah. They also used to charge you for looking at each book. Yeah, it wasn't a 9.8. It used to be $3 to $5. But that'd be nothing. That'd be nothing to someone searching for. If you're sending in a case, 100 copies of something, you'll be willing. I mean, if you're sending in 100 copies, that's $300 to have them look at all. That'd be like, if it's $3, that's $300 to get, 20 9.8s? You'll be like aces.
If they can sell them if it's a number 1 and they can sell it for $100 each, that's $2,000.
Right. And Comic Craft, the idea that it'd take a bit for second printing, it also might go out of print. If Locus isn't in print, I can't think of a book to keep in print more than that one. Love and Rockets is Fantagraphics bread and butter. Yeah, I'm sure 10 years from now you won't be able to find. You'll have a hard time finding.
I bet you the sales numbers on Monsters are going to be a lot better than 95% of what Fantagraphics is putting out these days.
But not Love and Rockets. Love and Rockets is their bread and butter. I mean, I'm sure those trade paperbacks are probably their bread and butter more than that big hardcover edition is. But
I don't know.
Yeah, the beat up Opus and Opus 2 are not printed anymore. I don't know who published
There
them.
are plans for reprints on both those too, maybe as one combined volume.
Yeah. Opus.
Yeah,
and Opus 2.
those were fairly affordable for a while, and then all of a sudden it's like they just shot way up in price.
Yeah, you can never tell. But like I said, stuff like that, stuff like Locus, someone buys, puts on their shelf, and never sells it usually.
Right. Well, I got pissed off because there was a reprint of Usagi Yojimbo Saga Volume 1, which I never got in hardcover because it was a slow print run. The reprints on those damn things went like that. And
Wow.
retailers are marking them up to like anywhere from $300 to $500 each. It's like, ugh.
Opus 1 I can't find for less than 200. Wow.
I found
the French.
I found Opus 1 for like $15. I don't have Opus 2. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always weird. I can still remember. I don't have them anymore because I sold mine. Avengers Assemble, which is the Kurt Busiek, George Perez. I only have volume 4 left, I think, because I sold them. I used to have volume 1, volume 3, 4, and 5, oversized hardcovers. And I got them for like $10 a piece.
Yeah.
Volume 2 went out of print and was like $200.
Yeah, there was a Goon omnibuses that Dark Horse did. For whatever reason, Volume 3 is the one that goes for crazy high prices, and the other ones don't.
I think they were surprised behind.
The French edition of Locus is also out of print.
Yeah.
It was funny because my comic shop was just telling me he now accidentally ordered too many copies of Monsters because I think he said he ordered 3 copies of it. I bought one off the shelf. I think he may have even taken one, but and he like sold out those 3, so he ordered 2 more. He got those 2, and then somehow he got 4 more after that. And he was like, "Did I order 4 more?" Plus, he had one of his customers order the signed and numbered edition.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't come in, so he bought the regular edition. So now he's got a signed, it's not even numbered, a signed edition. That he's like, oh, no one even wants a signed edition because I got no customer for it now.
Yeah.
Give me the contact information. I'll buy it off him.
Yeah.
Okay. Comics Warehouse, Pearl River, New York. I'll pick it up for you.
Monsters is also getting media attention, which is very unusual for a Fantagraphics title.
Yeah, Jared, just let me know how much. I mean, I'll PayPal you the money, however much it is.
Yeah. Monsters, I'm sure, sold out at most shops because most shops didn't order many.
Yeah, Stuart Ing's shop also has signed copies of Monsters.
It's $40 for the regular edition.
All right.
I think the signed one.
I don't know how much the signed one is.
I think it's $80.
It doesn't make any difference to me if it's signed or unsigned, but just
then get the unsigned one. It's half the price.
Yeah.
grab the unsigned one, or you go Thursdays, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I've been going Wednesdays. I will have to get back to Thursdays now that I'm vaccinated and can meet Rob again.
Aw.
Getting back to what Fenner 27 showed, Usagi's in this weird situation where Fantagraphics has the rights to publish the really early trade paperback compilations. Dark Horse has the rights to do everything they did after Usagi moved over to Dark Horse.
Right.
And now IDW has, I'm not exactly sure. I think they may have the rights to do, some of everything. It's weird. It's a weird situation.
I know. There also might be color rights.
Possibly, yeah.
They might have the rights to print them in color, but not black and white. Who knows? Because once they're in color, I think they're a new thing. I don't know how that works. Yeah. I hope IDW does a hardcover. So I still have, speaking of out of print.
That's a good question. I don't know if they have plans to do one or not.
Yeah. Yes, I see you. Fuck off.
I will say, if you're a Usagi fan and something comes out in hardcover, just go ahead and grab it while you can.
Yeah, I could barely get this one off my shelf because it's in a slipcase.
Well,
This one, I think, shot up in price to $1 million.
I have that one as well. That's a $500 plus set now.
Seriously?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone actually buys it at that, but that's what it's listed for on Amazon.
That's the going price you're asking. Yeah.
There are some things I've seen listed for high prices that I don't think anyone actually buys.
That's true.
I think this is the original Fantagraphics.
Yeah, that's a nice set. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think this is the stuff now they're doing in color.
Possibly.
If I'm not mistaken. Let me see.
That has been reprinted in softcover.
Yeah. This it was, matter of fact, it was already in soft cover when this came out. Frost and Fire. Wow, it's really nice printing on it.
Yeah.
Really nice print.
Good paper. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good set.
Okay, I'm glad I got that when I did because I wouldn't be able to afford it now.
Yeah, neither would. This is one of those things, something like this you have to get either right away or soon, because something like this comes out at a high price, then usually the price goes down for a little while and then it shoots up.
Yeah, it's so weird because some of the Fantagraphics hardcovers and the Dark Horse hardcovers that came out that aren't big compilations, they're like individual storylines, the
right
thinner book. Some of those are still really affordable.
Yeah, that's the one Fantagraphics needs to reprint. Yeah, and the soft cover is out of print too. Wow. When will we see Spec Mess driving hard? I've noticed that hardcover prices get driven up, but not by speculators, by readers. I have sold I've sold some of my hardcovers on eBay over the last 5 years, and they all went to readers, and not speculators or collectors, little people who wanted to read them.
Right.
Oh, did I freeze again? Yeah, I'm frozen again. Look, now I'm unfrozen.
Yeah.
It's not just the camera.
I think your camera reversed angle too.
Yeah, I think so. I moved a little, but strange.
It's weird.
Like that Mr. X one I've showed before also went up in price astronomically, but no one's looking for Mr. X.
Or the people that are just can't afford it.
Yeah. The people who might buy it for $25 aren't buying it for $500.
Right. I was actually reorganizing some of my want lists on Amazon a few days ago. I was looking, where you click on something, it'll show you what the available through these sellers, and some of the prices on that stuff is just insane now. I mean, it's just like, what? This book was like $25 like 2 months ago, and now it's $800. No,
Yeah, I can't get into buying books that are. Yeah, if I'm not going to read them and just keep them on my shelf. There's thing with toys, it's like the other dude was saying before that when I buy a toy, I open it and play with it. It's just so weird to me that there are people who have these incredibly expensive books on their shelf that they're keeping for no other reason than to sell it. When the price.
Well, I say the what are those? Those pop figures are the new Hummel figurines.
Oh,
I can see everybody who collects pop figures being like a grandmother or grandfather and showing their grandkids their pop figures, and the grandkids rolling their eyes.
Are you sure they're not going to go the way of Beanie Babies?
Now they've been around longer than Beanie Babies, and they're not worth money. Well, I'm assuming some are, but
Right.
people don't collect them because they're worth money. People collected those Beanie Babies because they were Beanie Baby speculators.
I know. How bizarre was that? I mean, that was just so weird. The people with like storage units full of just Beanie Babies.
Right. I mean, I know some pop figures go up in price, but I don't think there's pop figure speculators as far as I know.
Gotcha. But yeah, it's got to be a weird thing for the grandparents to be walking around with the pop figures like Hummel figurines. We thought Hummel figurines were bad enough.
Yep. And I laugh too at they now have plastic cases that the box goes in for the pop figure.
Yeah, you can slab your Funko figure, your Funko Pop.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Well, we should wrap up now since it's getting late for Paolo.
Yeah, we've been at it for 2 hours 45 minutes.
So we're gonna sign off.
What time is it where you are? Just
quarter to 2.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's 1:45. Anybody have any last words?
5 hours ahead.
Read some Whalesville Rocks and Minerals if you get a chance to find it.
I definitely want to get a hold of that one. That's so up my alley. I can't even tell you.
They're supposed to be sending me a comp package at some time. We'll see. And everybody have a good night out there.